Hello, everyone. If you can see and or hear us, please do let us know. A very merry Sunday to you all, wherever you may be in the world.
Did you say merry? I mean, why would one say merry? Are we discussing something to do with something merry? Because I thought we were discussing about a very sensible Warhammer character by the name of Bertrand Le Brigand. What's that got to do with being merry?
He's only the most serious character in the entirety of Warhammer Fantasy. The most serious. There's nothing noble, bright, or happy, or anything about this story. No, none whatsoever.
Robin Hood, riding through the glen. Robin Hood, with his merry men. I mean Bertrand Le Brigand.
Yeah,
this is gonna be a fun one.
He's the most original character in all of Warhammer. The most.
But then he does come from, before we actually dive into all of it, he does come from an era where many of the characters were sort of meme characters and just direct lips, and never was this more the case than the 5th edition editions with the Lizardmen and the Bretonnians. Both the Lizardmen and the Bretonnians, Nigel Stillman, the writer behind them, were very, very, let's say meme coded. That might be one way of putting it.
He was ahead of his time. He was ahead of his time.
No, he created that time.
What if I just made every character absolutely fucking ridiculous?
Yeah, and you might go, but no, the Bretonnian characters, they're all quite fine. No, they're just all copy-pastes from Grail romances and Robin Hood, pretty much. That's a bit unfair. There's a couple of them who've got a bit more to them.
Yeah, it's such a hilarious like mix of like, oh, you'll have these one character that has like really beautiful art and super over the top cool lore, and then you have like the unknown jousting knight.
Yeah,
and it's like
he just
nobody knows who he is.
Yep.
Nobody knows who he is, and he jousts, and you're like, oh, okay.
I actually quite, just as a small aside before we get going, I actually quite liked the 5th edition Bretonnian army list because it did something that doesn't happen very much anymore, in that it provided some really quite normal special characters. There's a nice mix. Some of them were properly special, the Green Knight or Morgan El Fay, as we discussed in our previous episode. But a lot of them were just like Bertrand Le Brigand, just relatively normal cheaps for very few points with a couple of just special rules that made them stand out and feel a little bit different. And where other army lists would give basically a special set of rules for a page per character, in the Bretonnian one, there's just like a little half-page one, a third-page one, a quarter-page special character. And then you fly into the bigger ones. Here's the king! So yeah, it's a nice little mixture.
Yeah, it was a different time. Like they and a lot of it would, interestingly enough, start to return because like a lot of the 6th edition cut down a lot of the special characters really hard.
It did.
And then they got to 7th edition and were like, haha, just kidding, let's bring them all back.
Yes, they did. Yeah, I find that whole era quite fascinating again before we get going, because you go Hero Hammer 4, Hero Hammer 5, with lots of different types of heroes at different scales. And then 6 comes along and goes, yeah, let's just get rid of most of that and just concentrate on building a really nice, good, balanced game with a couple of really in-depth special characters.
Yeah, like
and we'll just
2 to 3.
Yeah, 2 to 3 each, and we'll leave the rest of them to a quick paragraph description in the army list and nothing more. And then 7th went, now we like those characters, we're bringing them back, and you know all that balance that we added in 6th? We're going wild! Yeah! But not quite the Hero Hammer that came before. So in the previous game, I mean, it really was about choosing the best special characters, almost beyond anything else, and choosing your magic items. Where when it came into the 7th edition, it was a little bit more about building a good balanced army with all the cool special characters too. And then 8th came along and started being inventive again, I think would be a good way of putting it. They started adding to Warhammer rather than just simply reiterating what came before. 7th did a bit of that as well. 7th and 8th have got a good bit of crossover that people tend to forget.
Yeah, well, yeah, I mean, 8th in a lot of ways was sort of like, what if we did a 7.5, but we started adding in like a bunch of new models? Yeah, and everyone was like, oh, inventive things? I perished the thought. But we do hope you're all doing well today. Today is going to be interesting because it's another one of those ones where me and Andy kind of look at it and go, I don't know how we're going to talk about for 3 hours. But if we could do it for Dragon Ogres, we could do it for anything.
Yeah, Bertrand, I think, is going to be an interesting character for us to discuss, purely because of what he represents in Bretonnian society when he was introduced, and the very fact that he hasn't been copy-pasted into later editions. Now, you might go, oh, wow, well, he hasn't been copied, so he only pops up in one book. Pretty much, yes, but do note, there's only been 2 Bretonnian books. Covering so he wasn't in one and he was in another.
That's pretty good.
If we'd got ourselves a 7th or an 8th edition Bretonnian army list, he'd almost certainly be in there, probably rejigged, built again, designed in a new way, but that never happened, so we're still left with the version that came out in 5th edition all the way back in, well, I'll get into that when we go into the intro.
Yeah, at least he did get a really cute set of minis, which not all characters got minis. So
yeah, it's the truth. And they're pretty good too. I've painted them several times, as I'll discuss in the intro.
And did you make today's art, or did you just find something that was suitable?
So for those of you who've looked at the thumbnail today, I cheated. We had a discussion in the background, Sotek and I, about what we're going to do, because there's no official art for Bertrand. And I couldn't be bothered sitting down and sketching out, sorting a piece of art. That would take several hours, and it's just for a thumbnail. So I did a photo bash. Now, if you don't know what photo bashes are, basically means you go online, you grab a load of photos, and you slam them all together and make them work as one thing. Now, photo bashing for me is really easy. I used to do it quite a bit as a kid. I say a kid, I was in my 20s when I first started doing it. But yeah, that was pretty easy. So I just went and found a whole bunch of what I felt were good Robin Hood images, particularly Men in Tights and Errol Flynn. So if you don't know Errol Flynn, you really should. That's why the theme tune I was singing, Robin Hood, riding through the glen, that was Errol Flynn, the very first proper on-screen rendition of Robin Hood. And I took a bit of those, slapped them all together, took the eyes of one, popped it in, popped a nose, and it went, that will do, and then just painted over it really, really quickly, which is why the hat looks like shit. Slapped some textures on top of that, and we were good. Now, for those of you out there going, well, that's better than using AI, which, you know, is definitely an argument we could take. I used copyrighted material to do that. So it's exactly the same as AI. It's just I was processing it rather than an AI processing it. So I am in no way on the moral high ground here. I took Hollywood images, photo bashed them together and painted over them very, very quickly and slapped some textures on it.
It was funny because when I was looking at it, I was like, why does that look suspiciously like an actor in my father's favorite spaghetti westerns? He really looks like a spaghetti western era movie guy.
It's what I was going for. I really wanted him to look like he was a golden era movie hero, because in many respects, that's what Robin Hood was to the people who were creating him. But back in the 90s when it first came to about. Back in the 90s, everybody knew the classic Robin Hood era. And if you grew up in Nottingham, you're just basically surrounded by Robin Hood pretty much from the point when you're born. Yeah. And Games Workshop is in Nottingham. So the fact that there's a Games Workshop equivalent of Robin Hood is not only not a surprise, it's more of a surprise that there's only one.
I was going to say, it's more of a surprise that that's not like the White Dwarf thing. But anyway, all right, you ready to get into today?
Yeah, let's get into today. Let's grab our few. We haven't got too many super chats to begin with. To go, and then we'll dive into our intro.
Excellent. Listener Chris, Lorebeards were invited by the Fey Enchantress to visit Bretonnia. Then they toured the duchies, and when they were about to leave, they were accosted by Bertrand, then forced to build a shed. Not the shed.
Well, I'm not sure why we're building a shed.
So I've been building a shed.
Oh, you've been building. Of course, you were building an actual shed, weren't you?
Yeah. And it's terrible, and I hate it. But someone's gonna do it. So, yeah, it's we're struggling. Tech, are the merry men in Warhammer Fantasy? Yes.
Yes, they are. And indeed, even the article that was about them in White Dwarf referred to them as the merry band that follows Bertrand the Brigand. So we'll get into that in the intro. But loosely speaking, yeah,
they're fun, as we'll get into during Andy's intro, and we'll talk about them a good bit today because the roleplay game tried to evolve them into something very genuinely serious, and it did some fun things with them. They haven't been really used since then, but
no, they haven't.
Aliflux. WRT.
Someone tell me what WRT means. I'm old.
The tier listing stream, I assume. So tier list chaos gods. I don't know what WRT stands for, but that's what you must be referring to.
With regard to, thank you very much. Just like to say, Mornington Crescent, you rocked. Thank you very much for making that too. With reference to, with regard to, with respect to. We're getting all sorts of replies now. How did I not know that?
Yeah, Andy, how did you not know that?
Yeah, it's 100% my fault.
So with the Chaos God Dukedom streams, can we call you Sotek Gold Gatherer, or would you prefer the Lore Tyrant? What should we call Andy? Love to you guys at Fingers Crossed with the new era. We do need to think of probably some names that are particularly facetious for the tier list streams, because those ones get rather wild. So I'll have a think on that.
Yeah, me too.
Thank you very much. Necromancer Cobalt. So, fun Robin Hood fact. Almost every time a new innovation in literature into plays and film happens, Robin Hood is one of the first stories made for it.
Yeah,
it's a great story. It's classic.
Yeah, it does seem to appeal in a way that a lot of other stories don't. There's a lot of really old stories that run through English literature. But yeah, Robin Hood, I've studied in a variety of ways. I studied English literature as well. And it's, yeah, exactly as you describe it, Necromancer Kobold.
Lothazar Gelt.
Yeah, that can fuck right off on the side. Nice try.
Yeah, I mean, one of the thing that will always delight me about Robin Hood is that Disney surely could not have known what they were doing, creating the concept. Like the modern concept, I would argue it's existed before them, but the modern concept of furries literally came straight from Robin Hood. Dumbo. Thank you very much, Dumbo.
Well, thanks, Dumbo. That's super appreciated.
This could be a 40k-ism I'm importing into fantasy, but it seems like activists / rebels / outlaws are either secret cultists or silly / milquetoast / self-centered groups. Even in Cubicle 7's outlaw book, Liberated Priests of Renauld seem to reject systemic change.
So, yes, Dumbo, you're right. There is a conservative leaning in Games Workshop writing that I find problematic, because they very much pitch anything that is a rebel or anything that is outside activist or outlaw as effectively a source of chaos, small c that leads to chaos, big C. And this happens again and again and again. Now, it's not universal, as we'll be discussing with Bertrand Le Brigand. He is an example where that isn't the case. But the vast majority of the places where it's used, it very much is this. I don't like it. In the stuff that I write, I don't do that. I do use it because it is indeed a very clear area where big C chaos can attempt to undermine the established working order that might be moving to suppress their influence in various societies. And by the very nature of what they are, rebellion, particularly when it comes to Tzeentch, is a core component of that deity. And because it's a core component, many writers forget that just because that god involves that doesn't mean all expressions of that are bad. It's a little bit like how sex has been somehow conflated with Slaanesh. So it was very important, for example, in Warhammer 4th edition to make it very clear that there was a goddess of sex who wasn't Slaanesh, and sex is good. I mean, we all do it, for fuck's sake. Can't be that bad, surely. But so many writers basically said, and anyone that, does that is bad, and Sigmarites say it's bad, and bad. It was very puritanical and strange and weird in terms of how it was written, small c conservative writing that I wasn't entirely happy with. So deconstructing those stereotypes are something that I think any good writer should be there to try and do, particularly given that it's now reached the point where it's become almost a fundamental point of Warhammer writing. So you as a writer, if you're writing a scenario, for example, can play upon those expectations. Anyone who sees someone who is basically an agitator for change, their first thought is almost always, so this is the bad guy. It happens again and again in official writings. So you can use that to lead players down certain red herring routes, or this is obviously the good guy and the bad guy is actually the figure, not necessarily of establishment, but something a little bit different in terms of how you present your adventures. So loosely speaking, I agree. They either ridicule them or they turn them into cultists, and it's not good. And there is a certain amount of ridicule when it comes to Bertrand the Brigand, although it's played straight wherever it's used.
Yeah, and what I would add is fantasy definitely has a if you're sitting down, you're playing role play with fantasy and you're doing it well, then the establishment is going to be one of the major antagonists to your parties. But a lot of people Games Workshop has like this natural fear of the concept of like time moving and like systems changing or getting better, because that requires them to like do things they don't want to deal with. So it's kind of creeped into all aspects of the game to the point where it almost, whenever they have an opportunity where it's like, someone could bring about change, they will deliberately stomp on it and grind it down with their heel as like it's a bit of a wink, but when you kind of sit and look at it, you're like, this is a weird message.
It is, and in particular, it's a difference between the editions as well. If we go back to first edition Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, the figures of establishment were the bad guys every time. So if you go with the enemy within, the very first adventure takes you into a town, and the bad guys are the people who are in control. You go to the next adventure, and the bad guys are the nobles. You go to the next adventure, the bad guys are the people in control trying to kill effectively another character, who is also a character who's in control. Every adventure was about the bad guys are those in control. It was very Thatcherite era for the writers at the time. They were basically saying that the people in control in the UK are bad guys, and we need to struggle against them. But when we move into Warhammer Fantasy Battle, all of their special characters were the leaders of the nations. Karl Franz got changed from being an ineffectual weak emperor into a pillar of the community who was the best diplomat that the world had ever seen, and also somehow managed to find time to not just do all the diplomacy, but run around the battlefields hitting orcs in the face with a giant hammer every day. And Karl Franz became an almost cartoon representation of how heroic you could be as a leader. And all of the nobles weirdly bled over to that in all of their special characters, meaning that when later writers came in for Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, they were left in this strange place where the people in authority were the bad guys, but the people in authority were also the ultimate good guys. And they had to somehow try to conflate the two. And most writers didn't. And it's a bit of a mess because of that. So yes, loosely, you're right. It's not just a 40k thing. It is a Warhammer thing. Warhammer is a bit more complicated than how it is in 40k. But even in 40k, I mean, even in Warhammer, it's not great. It's a bit of a weird message.
Thank you again. Gary Garana saying, good evening. Post-elf, but pre-Brittany / Bretonia folks / species in the land. Beside Carcassonne, potential survivors, ethnic so like who lived there after the elves but before the Brittany came in? So
where?
In like around Carcassonne, so like
right. That was the Brittany. The Brittany, there's almost no pre-Brittany civilization at all in Warhammer's history. We have added to that over on LAWhammer with the always marvelous Saurus, who provided one example of an entire group of people who lived in the area before the Bretonni tribe arrived. Then the Bretonni tribe arrived, interacted with them, but there wasn't really a group there.
You're saying Bretonni? Do you mean Belfani?
No, I mean Bretonni. The Bretonni tribes. Belfani moved into the old world in the right basin. They didn't move into Bretonia.
Right.
So the Belfani are not really a Bretonia thing. They have their own equivalent, presumably. And when we did the LAWhammer one, we said this is the equivalent with Saurus. Saurus had a great idea, and we ran with that. But there isn't one officially. We have some pretty clear stories of the Bretonni being in the area at the time of Sigmar and before the time of Sigmar. So they arrived about the same time as the tribes that will make up the Empire. So they arrive around that same era, but what's there before? The gods alone know, because no one's really written it.
Yes, yeah. So we have no idea.
Yeah. But if you want one example, pop over to LAWhammer, type in the word Hedge Witch into the patron account. Just type Hedge Witch and you'll find like a 15, 20 page booklet on one group of peoples that predate the Bretonnia peoples in Bretonnia.
Okay, we're going to grab just a couple more and then we'll get into the stuff today. Gary Grana says, stream idea, My Little Pony. Oh, unicorns, pegasi, and other roughly equine creatures in the world.
Equine.
What makes them special? What breeds or bloodlines exist? We could definitely do something like that. I'd have to sit and think about how much we would need to divide it up.
You don't want intelligent talking horses that control orcs?
I mean, they would definitely come up. Yeah, because it would depend on if you count like just regular horses as part of that. They could probably be their own thing. Like we could probably do like magical horse adjacents and then horses. That could probably work. I don't know. We'll play around with that. There's something there we can do. Because there's a lot written about horses. Like, oh my god, there's so much horse lore. There's so much horse lore.
Horse shit. Yeah,
Necromancer Cobalt, second Robin Hood fact, most of his lore was made due to the change in society his stories were released in, such as his nobility being to making him palatable for the literate nobility.
Yep, 100% true.
Yeah, that's actually something I am kind of pleased they didn't do with Bertrand, which we'll get into it, where it's like, oh, he's a famous noble person that got sent away on the Crusades, and he came back, and his lands were gone, and yada, 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 yada. Singemeister, Bretonnia could use more takes on classic French folklore characters, such as Lady... I don't know who that is.
Lady Godiva.
Lady Godiva, Dick Turpin, Dick Whittington.
Turpin. I mean, Dick Turpin's not French.
Or the Guy of Warwick.
Dick Whittington's? He's not French. Wait a minute, what? French? Wait a minute. I see what you're saying. They need more English characters because it's a joke. I was like, wait a minute, what are you saying? Wait, I'm an idiot. Yes, you're right. And I wanted to make a small comment about that also because you are absolutely correct. Much like most of Warhammer lore, whenever they say, haha, we are fantasy France, we are fantasy Germany, what they mean is we are fantasy England.
With French accents.
With different languages put on top of it.
Yep. Michael Salma, can't watch now, but want to chip in. Have fun, lads. We appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. I think it's Mihao. It's got the dark L with the crow. I think that's Mihao.
Mihao. Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
Mihao. If you're out there later, Mihao, can you confirm if I'm pronouncing your name right? If I'm not, then I shall just back away.
Yeah, I have that painful American English education.
Oh, I say. Are you English by any chance?
If you do anything to a letter, I don't know what it means. If you put dots around it or a line through it or anything, I have no idea what that means.
Yeah, that's a dark ale. And yeah, I know a few of those a little bit too well because I just as a small aside, I've been writing as a small keep myself sane as I do other work project. I've been writing a bit about lingua prestantia, and knowing all the diacritics is pretty important. So diacritics, all the little symbols that you put around letters to make them sound different.
Donovan, on Dumbo's point, while prevalent in Warhammer, especially 40k, just by the nature of the Imperium being the worst, to be frank, this is a wider trope problem of the villain seems to... the villain seems actually right. Oh, make him do something bad real quick so we know he's the bad guy. Not excusing it, it's often a bad trope, but it's more widespread. You mean like every Marvel movie, pretty much?
You know what? This is like an entire side conversation. I'm just going to go say kind of but I have a lot of opinions on this one.
Yeah. Okay. Two more, and then we got to get into it. Necromancer Cobalt, final fact, his name was in reference to his headgear being a Robin Hood, and in his OG stories was closer to a highwayman who just had a code of who not to mug and kill.
Sure. I didn't know that one.
Yeah. I mean, that makes sense. Makes sense.
Sure.
Jonathan Scott, apples do better in forest than grapes. So they probably drink cider, not wine. It's probably why Bertrand's...
Yeah, I'm looking forward to this. Go.
Ben de Joyhu
Companions? Yeah, the companion.
Sings so much.
Sure.
I don't even know I don't even know the difference between cider. Is cider alcoholic? I don't think it is. Is it?
Yes, it is. Cider is alcoholic and it's made of apples.
Ah, okay. Okay.
Wine is typically made of
Is
from
it
grape.
Stronger? Is that why he's saying they're more likely to sing?
I'm not sure it's always stronger. It depends on the cider and depends on the wine.
Yeah. So why do they sing so much if it's cider rather than wine? What's the Shut up, Professor Chef.
That was exactly what was happening. No, go. I always enjoy it. And then you try to forgive. It's a bit this way.
Okay, last one. Then we seriously gotta go. A drunk Robert Baratheon surrounded by 100 Artois boars. I'm surrounded by fear and fucking salted pork. How would a young Robert be as a Grail Knight? I don't know if he ever would have survived drinking from the Grail based on what we know about him.
Yeah. Well, Robert, when he was young, was a genuine hero. He was also nothing like the television version if you go by the books. He was a fucking giant, an enormous man, bound with muscle, who loved war and then found himself in peace times leading a kingdom that he literally had won and had no interest in leading.
He probably would have done really well in Warhammer then.
Yeah, becoming king broke him. I think he might have done better as a Grail Knight.
I take that back. He probably would have been an awesome traveling Grail Knight.
He would have probably done all right.
And would have died somewhere gloriously and died with a smile on his face.
He would have certainly been a lot happier than becoming the king he became, because he became king, got fat, hated everything about it, started whoring. It all went very wrong for the poor man.
Antonio, thank you very much. I deeply appreciate that.
Oh, thanks. That's enormously appreciated.
All right, I'll shut up and let Andrew do the intro then.
Okay, let's get on with it then. Well done, Antonio. You got us started. Bertrand Le Brigand. Who the fuck is this then, eh? Now, for those of you who are playing almost any game involving the word Warhammer in it, you won't have a clue who he is, because he's not in any of them bar a single edition of Warhammer Fantasy Battle, going all the way back to 5th edition. So let me paint a brief picture as to that era. We are in the mid-90s. Grunge music is just on the tail out, and all sorts of new metal are coming in. It's a different era. The wide shoulder pads of the 80s are over, but the writers are still quite caught up with we fucking hate the Conservatives and Thatcher and everything they represent over in the UK, because the Conservatives are still in power, having been in power for an absolute age. So a character like Bertrand Le Brigand, someone who faces off against those in power, is almost certain to be of interest to those writers, particularly when there are a bunch of lefties writing away in Games Workshop, which is exactly what they were. So, in this edition of Warhammer, it's the 5th edition, Bretonnia had just been added as a new faction. There was no Bretonnian faction before 5th edition. Well, there was. If we go back to 3rd edition, there was Bretonnia, but not in the Knights of the Grail version that we know today. It was certainly hinted at in 3rd, but not driven in hard the way that the army list did. And when the new army list came out after the box set with the Lizardmen and the Bretonnians in it had been released, the new army list painted an entirely new Bretonnia. Bretonnia of knights and fairy tale castles and dragons and questing heroes moving across the land. It did not seem to be the Bretonnia that we once knew. But when we looked between the lines, we very quickly realized that this version of Bretonnia was frightfully English. And by that I mean, for all it had all the trappings of France, in that they were saying French-sounding things. Often, though, when you actually looked at what the French words meant, you went, that's the words they used? That's basically, wow, that's bad. We'll get to that in a moment. Remember the word bad. The French wasn't very good because it was written by Englishmen, and they really didn't care about how good the French was because they were composing it largely for an English-speaking audience. And, well, all of the characters were pretty much based upon English stuff or stuff that was cited in England with this scheme of, but Grail romances, they came from France, right? They're all about King Arthur and the Knights of the Round and If anything, you could argue it's in Cornwall, so a little bit off the edge of England. But it's hardly not. It's English, man. No, because I used the word "oo" and between Brigand and Bertrand. And one of the many heroes that they added in the 5th edition was an alliteration-tastic character with more bees in it than you can shake a stick at, but sadly not involving any real bees because they ditched drinking mead and replaced it with wine. So what we got was Bertrand le Brigand and the Bowmen of Bergerac. Okay, Bergerac being lifted directly from the very famous TV show called Bergerac that was on TV at the time. There is nothing more clever to it than that. It was set down in the Channel Islands, which is about as French as you can get for the UK because it's closer to France, but is still, English speaking. And it's a bit of a tax haven. So Bergerac had been added. Bergerac was a detective, has nothing to do with the Bowmen of Bergerac. It's just a French-sounding name that they like the sound of. Gotta love it. Now, people are almost certainly, in fact, I was looking down to the comments for that, but Cyrano de Bergerac, trust me, no, that's not what they were thinking. Cyrano de Bergerac is what sensible people on the outside think, going, oh, it's just that, isn't it? No, it's not a reference to Cyrano de Bergerac. It's a reference to Bergerac, the TV detective. Now, I might be wrong. It's very possible Nigel Stillman will come and say, no, it's Cyrano de Bergerac, but I have it on pretty good authority from someone who directly asked him that, and by that was me, I did it at Games Day, that it was a reference to Bergerac. He, however, may have been joking at the time. Perhaps he was.
Based on all the other names in the book, I don't think he was.
No, I think that's fair. Be as clear as we can be here when we start off with Bertrand le Brigand. He is a Robin Hood copy-paste into Warhammer, which is an English myth, an English folk story that has been passed from the English into their version of France. And they've done nothing to make it sound more French other than change the names. And if you happen to be a speaker of French, you might not be entirely happy with some of the names they chose. And one that I'll bring up in just a moment, but I'm not going to go into depth because there's not a lot of story for us to discuss here. So if I do this in the introduction, we'll have already said everything we're going to discuss about Bertrand. So I'm not going to do that here. Instead, I'm going to say, back then, when it came out, the general response to it from the public was, what the fuck is just Robin Hood? Not even joking. Bertrand le Brigand was added as a character. He was about 80-something points, which, for those of you who know your Warhammer Fantasy Battle game in the past, is super cheap for a special character. And he wasn't that great. He had the maximum ballistic skill for a human at that time, although it could go up to 7, so in some situations, he wasn't that good a shot. He was just a relatively solid... Yes?
Oh, I'll let you finish.
He was just a relatively solid wee character with a nice bit of ballistic skill, his own little special magic artifact, and a special rule for his bowmen. And the Bowmen of Bergerac with a nice wee tail sitting behind it, saying basically he's Robin Hood riding through the glen. And he's an outlaw doing his thing. When the miniature came out, not too long after, we're probably talking about 1996 when it came out. White Dwarf, as was often the case, and to a degree is how White Dwarf was often used, was basically an advert for whatever the new miniatures were coming out that particular month. And they did a small article in there as well about his merry men, the Bowmen of Bergerac, and they went a little bit more in depth into his interesting tale, the tale of his great daring do, taking down a great creature, which we'll get to. It's got the best name in the world, by the way. You're going to absolutely love this. And the local Castle de Bergerac, which got renamed into something super awesome in French. Trust me, when you hear this name, you are going to be blown away. You'll hear this name and just go, the inventiveness through the roof. So we get a story. A little bit of extra discussion about them all, but that's about it. That is it. They have managed to post in their version of Robin Hood into the Warhammer world with his own exciting tale, his own little story. And we could just stop there. But I think you'll find that as we move on, the ball that was set rolling by Bertrand le Brigand was picked up by the roleplay game in ways that you might not realize. Because Bertrand le Brigand did something that nothing else in the Bretonnian Army list really did, which was say, knights were bad. They weren't all good. And such a small little bit, but that little bit got picked up by the roleplay game in Knights of the Grail and got rolled down the hill quite a bit further. And for all Bertrand, after this point, has almost zero direct influence to anything. One of his successor groups do pick up in the end times. That's something, right? What we have is a special character who is grounded in the 90s and is grounded in a version of Bretonnia that hasn't really been moved on from because Games Workshop never really added much to Bretonnia. They did 2 army lists and neither of those contradicted each other. That's it. Just 2 army lists of that place and nothing else. So we've got effectively an excellent character with not a great deal of detail, but one that, because of the interesting aspects that his story adds to the setting, gives us some really interesting potential stories that Bretonnia can tell that some writers have sort of danced with through the roleplay game and in the novels, where knights are not quite as clean as they were presented in the 5th edition of the game. And I think that alone makes it interesting. Plus, it also speaks to a lot more agency amongst the peasantry than you might first expect, which is also a super fun aspect that this character brings to the table. But beyond that, there's not a lot for us to discuss in the intro. Because what we have is some nice miniatures from the 90s, and they are pretty good. They're also a very rare example of where Games Workshop were willing to play with scale with their miniatures. Now, you might go, what the fuck, Andy? Games Workshop, a huge miniature. No, people aren't all uniform height. But if you look at a regiment, they're all uniform height. Always. The only time they generally play with scale is when someone is either A, notoriously big or notoriously short. Now, one of the characters in his little group, Hugo Le Petit, is indeed very big. We got scale. But Guy Le Gros, who is effectively their Friar Tuck, is also short. And the main character himself, Bertrand le Brigand, is not the biggest. They actually played with scale with those miniatures in the way they don't often do with their miniatures, where almost everybody is always the same height. It doesn't matter if you're an elf, doesn't matter if you're a human, doesn't matter if you're an orc. They're all basically sitting at either that 28 or 32 millimeter scale, which is bollocks because all elves are much bigger than humans. All of them. But do they do that in the miniatures? No. And that's a nice little aside for the miniatures. But beyond that, nice miniatures. 90s bit of background. We're going to be delving into not just the background of the character himself, but the implication of what that character is and the knock-on effects we move into other groups that sort of picked up the idea that was presented by the Bowmen of Bergerac and ran with it a bit further.
You know, this is completely it's moderately related to everything you just said, though this is probably the worst takeaway I could have from that wonderful intro. But I really feel like if we ever do Lorebeards merch, the very first t-shirt should say something along the lines of fantasy. When you have the Germans, but they're British, and you have the French, but they're British, and you have horrible monsters, but they're British.
I mean, even the high elves are just a walking
British
metaphor for the British Empire. And its fall. It's crazy. Oh, I might sneeze.
Oh.
Oh, that was good.
There it was. Good.
Wow, that was a good one. I like that. Right, let's get to do some more super chats before we dive into probably the history to begin with.
Yeah, we'll go through a story.
That sounds good.
There are some interesting threads because there are some threads that I'm like, oh, this will be quick, and I'm like, ooh, but if we pull on that, so we'll see where we end
I
up.
agree.
Biofla, thank you very much, my dude, for the bits. Did Bertrand ever rob the Palace of Versailles?
No.
He should have. But no, I don't think we have those. Stephen Lucas, how would you adapt the French legend of Saint Martha and the Tarasque prophetess riding a dragon turtle?
So I would need to know that legend. That's how I would adapt it. I'd read it and then adapt it.
Yeah, the TLDR is basically there's a big horrible monster called the Tarasque, and everyone's like, horrible monster, and this beautiful woman shows up and she calms it because
why a dragon turtle then?
Because the Tarasque, it's the way it's described. It's kind
also,
of like
but does Saint Martha end up riding the Tarasque at the end?
No, actually, she calms it using like her amazing skill. I can't remember if she sings or if it's just enchanted by her beauty, and then the peasants fucking kill it, and she gets fucking furious at them for killing it. Becomes peaceful. And it's a whole story. It's really interesting.
So the answer to that would probably be, I mean, if it's a saint, you'd be then looking at, probably a prophetess. But the riding a dragon turtle, that's an angle. I'm not sure where that one's coming from.
I think you have to be really cautious about using monsters in Bretonia. Like, really cautious. Like, if they're not super significant to the lady, the Tarrasque almost feels like it would be a story about a time that, like, the human servants of the lady goofed and killed something they weren't supposed to. If you're basing it more on the actual original myth, if you're wanting it more to be like, if you're wanting it to be,
that's exactly the comment I was bringing up too.
If you're wanting it to be more like,
I'm gonna have to look it up.
Yeah, the D&D has popularized the concept of the Tarrasque, because in D&D the Tarrasque is like one of the most horrifyingly powerful monsters in the setting, where it's like basically invincible.
Oh, it's like got a head of a lion according to this one, and like the body of a turtle, sort of.
Yeah, it's weird. But
six legs and a serpent tail. Holy shit balls!
Like, it would work great as
How did I miss this one throughout my entire life?
I don't know. You'll love the story. The original story is actually really good.
Look at this one. Oh, there's some really good ones. I'm just going to say thanks for highlighting that story I've not read. I'm going to go check it up afterwards.
Great. And actually, we would probably... that would make a really fun Wednesday stream. Maybe we'll do that this Wednesday of, like, creatures that don't exist in Warhammer that you think that maybe they should, and we could talk about it. Maybe we'll do that this Wednesday, because we don't have anything planned for this Wednesday.
Yeah,
so that could be fun.
Idea.
Anyway, Darius Rose, GK Robert versus Theodoric. Also, late contest, who'd win? Who? I don't know either of these.
GK, are we talking about Game of Thrones, Robert? Because that's what we were discussing before. Robert Baratheon? No, that's GK Grail Knight Robert. Grail Knight Robert.
Oh, Grail Knight Robert versus Theodoric. Theodoric? Who's Theodoric?
Which Theodoric? Because there's several. Darius, I need just a touch more detail.
The horny Duke. The horny Duke from the tier list.
There's also like Theodoric Gausser.
Yeah, no. He means the most recent. He means the most recent one, the Duke.
Okay, so the Duke.
Yeah, the Duke of Brigand.
And which Robert are we talking about?
Grail Knight Robert Baratheon.
Is that what we're talking about?
Yes.
If it's that, then I mean, it could be either. It depends on the tale of this mythical Robert that we've just built.
Yeah, I don't know. Whoever's writing the story, I don't know, man.
Some weak ass thinking from us today.
I know. Omnicide 101. I love how Warhammer Fantasy Battle makes ripping off real life and art form. Realized last stream Arden is Ardennes. Bore reference to Chaucer's Ardennes. Artois is Wallonia. I don't know. You're saying words, and I don't know anything. Y'all are.
I'm loving this.
I don't fucking know what y'all are talking about anything.
Oh, this is gonna be the best stream ever.
I just want to talk about fucking a dude with a bow, and y'all are throwing words at me I've never seen in my life. What is happening here? Bones, is it better to say Bretonia is Anglo-Norman over French? Not just your examples, but in Total War, the peasants have English accents and Lord French. I don't understand why CA did that. That killed me when I played the game and they did that.
So I find that, Bones, an interesting comment, because I actually think thinking of them as Anglo-Norman is the best way to go, and matches very closely to the Robin Hood myths as well, where, let's be honest, their king was French. Okay, I mean, Richard of Lionheart. No. He's an English king. He's French. Get out of it. And the entire period in English history is all of the nobles are speaking French. The rule of law in the land, all the courts are using French, and all the peasants are using English. It is 100% accurate to an Anglo-Norman style ideal. So yeah, I think that works quite well.
Yes, and it'll make your head hurt less, I'll tell you that.
Yeah.
Bones, when GW showed up Bertrand, they used plastic bowmen. Why not Bretonian squire models? They seem much more fitting for his marriage, because they wanted them all to be archers.
Yeah, because they were meant to be peasants, and the squires are not the same. Where the peasants were the plastic models, so they used those. I would really love to have had some Regiment of Renown style bowmen of Bergerac. That would have made sense. It would have been great.
Yeah, it would have been nice if they were more like a Dog of War set.
Yeah, exactly. It would have been really good. I remember at the time, we sold quite a lot of the plastic set because of that. Because you could buy not just the Warhammer set where you got the plastic bowman, but you could buy the a group of 10 of them for £5 back then. So we sold fucking tons of them off the back of him because he was a cheap hero that you could just put on the side of any Bretonnian army, and he did something that a lot of the more expensive heroes didn't do. He sold really well, because every Bretonnian army could afford to include him because he was so cheap in points.
Yeah, his rules weren't bad. He they were
fine.
It's like
yeah, we'll get to that. We'll do our what was he like? Yeah, he's pretty decent.
Battlefield 78. We need Bertrand to rocking out to some Rage Against the Machine and sticking Shay stickers all over Halifax. Oh, Shay Guevara, how he would feel about all of those stickers.
Yeah,
the capitalist and what?
I mean, I am still delighted that Rage Against the Machine got to #1 in the UK, as everyone was fighting off against, for Christmas #1 in the UK, as they were fighting off against what had become the yearly Christmas #1 theft by the pop stars the rivals, the equivalent of the TV show machine manufacturing new bands. And people just got so fed up of it that they all went, let's just get Rage Against the Machine, which was released fucking ages ago, isn't at all anywhere near the charts, and no one's talking about it, and just get it to #1. And an upswelling ground campaign started, and it got to #1, and it's fucking brilliant.
That's very funny. Donovan, Andy, what are you talking about? The elves are much taller. Surely that's represented by their helmets. They have a head under there, right? Yeah.
You know what's even more annoying? All
elves are cone heads.
To make something that bugs me even more, if you take, say, the Dark Elf miniature and put it beside an Empire miniature from the plastic era. The Dark Elf miniatures, including hat, are about the same height as the Empire miniature, including hat. And the Dark Elves have got the bigger fucking hats. It means that, well, admittedly, they're crouching slightly, but I remember lining up all my Dark Elves, the plastics, not the Witch Elves, which came out a bit later. They were relatively tall and graceful, but just the Spearmen. And they're just nonsensely short. They all look like they're 5 foot tall. Properly weird.
I'm curious, was Rapunzel added to the lore for more or less the same reason that Bertrand was? So Rapunzel dropped in the same edition, the same 5th edition book,
and a rare French edition reference, an actual French one. I'm quite looking forward to doing a Rapunzel stream just so that we can go, for every rule there's an exception, and Rapunzel is our actual proper exception.
I do hope we get to do her someday, because she has like a crew of some really crazy characters.
Yeah, she does. I just want to answer Bearer here as well. Just on this, you don't get it, and by that you mean the scaling, and it is the scaling. Yes, the elves are all quite short, because they're scaled to the same scale. The physical miniature are scaled to the same size as the Empire, the humans. They're scaled to everything else. The only ones that are actually legitimately shorter are halflings and dwarves, and it's kind of weird, because if they make the halflings and dwarves shorter, surely they should make the elves taller, but they don't, because they're scaled to the 32 mil scale.
All right, this will be the last one before we get into the lore stuff. Stephen Lucas, thank you very much. Really appreciate the support. Add to future Warhammer stream. Explain how you would Warhammerify Uma Musume, as in, if you want to include them in a Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay 4th edition, how would they fit into the world? Likely Bretonia. How would you stat them as a PC race option? Physical/performance. We'll keep asking until we make it a supplement in a separate. Stephen, I worry about how detailed your. I could give you some very quick bullshit, but the level of specificity is starting to worry me a little bit. So,
it just amuses me. I'm like, yeah, let's do this shit.
That
we all need an extra tail in our life anyway.
Yeah, we will. I'm too tired for this. We'll circle back around to that.
Circle back later
in like a week. Come back to me in a week on that one. Oh my dear Lord. All right, Bertrand the Brigand. So
we're getting off of Bertrand. Okay, I'm going to settle in. Here we go.
Yeah, this story is pretty fast, though there are some parts that will. You were talking about the horse stream, dude. There was too much detail in that. I was scared that I was like completely genuine. No, we'll definitely do it.
It is genuine. What's wrong with you? Seriously, Sotek?
There's things I want to say right now and I can't. Moving on. So, Bertrand the Brigand. This story, the 5th edition basically builds up the story. It got a lot more development in a later White Dwarf. The original 5th edition story is actually very, very short. And
super short.
Nothing. So we're going to focus mostly on the White Dwarf, which kind of expanded the story and gave it kind of like a full arc. But basically, the way the story goes is that there is a place called Bergerac that is said to be somewhere... Bergerac, whatever. Which is... you don't like Bergerac?
No. That sets my teeth in edge.
But they have a white castle there, I hear. But so it's a land that belongs to some lord that's said to be in the forested heartland of Bretonnia.
Somewhere.
Yeah. So if we're trying to take it super seriously, somewhere like southern Forest of Arden, somewhere around the Forest of Shalom, maybe. But basically, they're in this forested region. There's like this great hill and everything. And there's this...
Actually, I think we can place it. While you're doing it, I'm going to go check something out.
Sure, go ahead and do that. There is this wonderful, noble lord. But he has reached the point in his life where he decides that he is going to go out and take the questing vow and seek the favor of the...
It's going to be the Forest of Shalom.
That would make sense.
It's almost certainly going to be the Forest of Shalom because...
what's about to happen?
Yeah. If you think about the surrounding types of species you have, but it could be anywhere. It could be in Canal, it could be in Bordeaux, it could be in Aquitaine, it could be in Bastogne.
I think I would put my money on Northern Canal because the Black Chasm is far enough away at that point.
Yeah, I think that seems fair. I'd say North Canal makes sense, or you could easily go with Aquitaine or Bordeaux as well. But Canal, I think, makes most sense because it's closer to the massive Orcal, and there's going to be a massive Orcal problem very soon.
Oh, God, I hate so much how they chose to name things. But anyway, Bergerac is their great noble lord who's said to just be the best. He's just the coolest guy. He runs off to go do the questing vow, to go on the quest and find the Lady of the Lake. And he leaves behind his wife and his son in charge of the land and his daughter. Now, in their lands, because he goes off, things are fine for a little while, but and he's been gone for like a decade or something. But after a few years, because he's not around, the people that are in the castle, notably his son, who's supposed to be really leading things, kind of is a bit lazy. He's noted for being fairly cruel and a bit of a coward. Like he's fine bullying peasants around. He's fine telling people what to do, screaming at people, losing his temper. He kind of comes off very much like a spoiled brat. But he's terrified of dealing with the actual creatures of the wild. So when greenskins start to come down from the mountains, Massive Oracle, and they start raiding the land, he is expected to basically try to earn his knight errantry and go out and fight them. But he doesn't. He instead...
I'm also going to add a small detail in here, because I think there is an interesting detail for the way to use greenskins in stories here that isn't necessarily a focus of the story, but is really important for understanding this one, because we've discussed in the past how greenskins are not just the Warhammer army force that we all understand. They are a more complicated species, and they don't simply massacre, murder everything in their path all the time. And if they did, this story can't happen. Literally can't. Because in this story, we have ourselves what is a small fiefdom in a far larger dukedom. A small area, Bergerac, surrounded, as it will very quickly become, by greenskins. And these greenskins don't kill everyone. They raid.
Yeah,
they come in, they take what they want, and they go away again. And they come back and they take what they want and they go away again. These are not the murderous creatures that we often have described in the army lists, often in the stories as well. These are a far more or far less sophisticated, violent, whichever particular vowel you want to go with. But these greenskins are raiders. Let's make sure we've got this clean. It's also orcs, not goblins, just to make sure we've got that one as well. So we're not got this, they're smaller and that's why they're not necessarily taking them out. No, bullshit. These orcs could have wiped out everybody here with relative ease, and they don't, because they're using them to get access to resources. It's the classic story of, the embattled peasants in the village who have got an outside raiding party that are effectively taxing them for stuff that they want. At the same time, though, just to go back to the story, our evil son of our missing lord is equally taxing the local peasants to higher and higher amounts.
Yeah, so the Baroness and her son and her daughter are up in this castle with all their knights. Like, their knights are not going out to fight. They're not fulfilling their part of the social contract that exists in Bretonnia. But they're still extorting taxes, and if anyone tries to avoid their taxes, they get punished brutally. Now, it's said that Bertrand is introduced at this part of the story, is a strapping young lad. He's a muscular man who, with his oxen, plows the fields but around the castle, and he lives very nearby it. And he has long had his eyes on the daughter, the Baroness.
It's the other way around. The daughter has her eyes on him.
Oh yeah, she adores him.
Let's make sure we got this the right way around. She's trapped in the castle because, as it turns out, it's not the son that's really the problem, it's the mother. The mother's a total horror show, and she's apparently, so many people claim, the descendant of the noble lords of Mousillon, which also makes sense for them being in, for example, maybe the Bordelot area or somewhere around there. But you could easily move it into the Forest of Arden. You could easily move it into Old Mousillon as well. There's lots of places we could go, but we want greenskins, so you'd have to go to the other side of that forest. I still reckon Forest of Chalon is better. Anyway,
one of the things one of the things I'll say that's interesting is there is kind of the implication that the daughter has always had eyes for Bertrand, even when her father was around. But when her father left and the years moved on, her desire towards Bertrand grows, and her mother's like, nope, and has her locked up in a tower.
And she's locked up, literally. So for those of you looking for your Robin the Hood illusions, this is Maid Marian, and I'm going to say it very bluntly, shit. Because she's given no name. She
doesn't even have a name.
She's given zero character other than she lusts after a peasant farmer that somehow, with her eagle eyes, she can see from her castle tower. Being aware that most Bretonnian castles tend to be somewhat fairy tale-esque in appearance, and either being in one of two places, the centre of a town, not good for spotting farmer peasants doing their job, or sitting on top of some sort of defensible area which looks down onto fields often many miles away. Let's just say they have a unique geography here.
Yeah, and there's a bit of a note that the greenskins don't come too close to the castle. They're mostly antagonizing the areas around it. But one of the things that's also kind of interesting here is that the Baroness is talked a little bit about in the White Dwarf in a kind of a fun way of that. What she have expected to have done was to tell her son to take the vow of the knight errant, go out, blood his lance against the greenskins, but she doesn't, because she doesn't want her son, her baby boy, in harm's way. So she doesn't do that. Then the second thing she's supposed to do, if not that, is to marry off her daughter to someone who is willing to come and clear the lands of greenskins. But once again, she refuses to do that. Now, we'll come back to her in a second, because she becomes relevant again here in a second. Also, I need to turn fuzzy. But, so Bertrand is out there, once again, plowing those fields, sweating very erotically as the princess watches him from her window every day. And the peasants keep going to Bertrand and say, hey, man, you're big and strong. Can you, help us with this greenskin problem? And eventually, they convince him to help. And for seemingly, and out of nowhere, there's no explanation for why this is the case. He's a fantastic archer. No explanation.
For anyone who knows the story of the Seven Samurai, the Magnificent Seven, or all of the various pastiches that are based upon those movies, he basically becomes the Magnificent One.
Yeah. So he goes, okay, I'm gonna go train all these peasants how to shoot bows. And and it makes sense that he would know, a lot of Bretonnian bowmen are just peasants that they learn to use the bow because it's what peasants are often allowed and expected to know and all that stuff. And he has his own really nice bow. So he teaches the peasants how to get really good at shooting arrows, to the extent that when the orcs start coming down, suddenly they're meeting resistance. And interestingly, it's kind of comes off of it's like Andy said, it's not a big wall. It's not like they sense resistance. They're like, oh, it's a time for a fight. When they run into staunch resistance, they kind of just
fair enough.
Yeah, they're like, oh, we're gonna go get these targets.
I think this is the point where we have to say there is a story here. And the story is about to get another detail as we move on towards what happens with the resolution here. But there has to be a story here. And the fact that this background was never properly expanded out with a 7th or an 8th edition version meant that we've never had this story be told. And the story is something like this. Why do the orcs not massacre them? There's a story there explaining either A, why Bertrand was a genius, and his form of guerrilla tactics completely astounded and confused or otherwise held off the orcs and broke them up in a way that made it particularly difficult for them to form their usual blocks that just destroy everything in their path. Or alternatively, the orcs are facing some form of external fear or have easier prey or something. But there is a story that's not quite told.
I have a headcanon, but it's not time for me to reveal it yet.
Yeah, I have a couple of potential headcanons too. Let's see where this one goes. This is going to be fun.
Yeah. So, Bertrand, through whatever methods, it's not really explained, helps the peasants fight off the greenskins. And they're like, hooray, this is great. Only for the prince and the baroness, or not, well, I guess
he's not a prince. No, he's probably a baron.
Yeah, they do.
Or a baronet, actually. He'll be a baronet.
They call him a prince in the story, which is stupid.
That's because of Prince John.
Yeah. So the baroness goes, oh, you stopped the greenskins from taking your stuff? That means you could give us more stuff. So they keep increasing
taxes go up.
And this is where rumors start to circulate very, very widely that the Baroness is an evil cultist. She's a sorceress.
Descended from the line of Mousselon.
Yeah, and she's clearly perhaps in league with the ruinous powers. And then...
Oh, no, they never mentioned that. Interestingly, the story never mentions ruinous powers once.
Oh, yeah, I think
as I recall.
Dark powers.
Yeah, dark powers and similar, because there's always that idea that they're attached to Mousselon and the dark magics that came from there, but not necessarily chaos. Because you often find that whenever they do bad guys in Bretonnia, it's always it's hinted at there. It might be that, but it's more likely to be something else like necromancy or dark magic or something like that. Or vampires, because, hey, it's Bretonnia.
Yeah, and they say, oh, she's summoning demons and she's a witch and yada, yada, yada.
A demonologist.
So, now, prepare yourself because the story takes a fucking hard left turn. So you would expect in the saga of Robin Hood for Bertrand to start fighting against the Baroness and his son. Nope, there's no time for that. No time for that, because what happens one day is suddenly everyone hears a horrific, loud shriek as the castle cracks open like an egg, and a horrible, monstrous creature simply identified as the giant flappy monster of Chateau Mal, which is...
Now, the reason that we bring up Chateau Mal is because it's all the locals have started referring to the Chateau de Bergerac, the great Castle Bergerac, as Castle Evil. Because it's that black and white. They're now calling it Chateau Bad. It's Chateau Bad Place. It's the bad castle.
Evil house.
Yeah, wow.
So,
bad house.
Yeah, apparently such a bad house that if you talk about it, now granted there could be a little bit of a story because it is mentioned that anyone who talks about Chateau Mal suddenly falls ill or becomes like deeply sick. So maybe it has a fancier name, but they just refer to it as Chateau Mal because that's the safe way to refer to it. But anyway, so the great flappy monster pops out, and it's this horrible cyclopean creature that's 100 feet tall and has
pretty big
wings, and in its jaws are the bloody corpses of the Baroness and her son. As it is,
and in his claws is the daughter.
Yeah, and then so the princess, the daughter, starts screaming, understandably, and the monster goes, person, and reaches in and grabs her, and as it's about to eat her, Bertrand runs up, and once again, no explanation, pulls out the black arrow, and you may go, oh, the black arrow, that sounds awfully Tolkien, and yes, it does. But what the black arrow is, once again, no explanation for this, and you're about to go, the what? He has a dragon tooth tied to an arrow feathered with black carrion feathers, and he fires it, and it nails this big demon in the eye.
I'm not sure it's a demon.
Whatever the fuck it is.
Whatever the fuck it is, but yeah.
Blinds it, and it screams, and it lets her go. And this is the one part of the story where Hugo Le Petit shows up, because he catches the princess, and then he, as he's running, Bertrand starts firing a bunch of flaming arrows into the building because the monster falls back into the building as it's shot in the eye. And the building goes up in flames, kills the monster, burns everyone else in the castle alive, who were all absolutely bad guys, and there was no collateral damage whatsoever.
There was definitely no good guys in that place.
There were definitely no servants. So everyone inside burns to death. And after that, Bertrand and his lover, they get married.
Yeah, so she's so just to make sure we understand what the political situation is now, she has now become, in absence of her father, the Baroness. She's now the Baroness. She's the Baroness of Bergerac. Meaning that she is now eligible to marry, obviously, and she chooses to immediately marry her young peasant lover, which is not something that's uncommon in Bretonia, as much as it might sound like it is, but it's relatively common for pretty youths to attract the eye of nobles, and for them to perhaps go somewhere that the rest of the families may not approve of. It's not unknown, but without any outside interference or acceptance, she just does it, which means that effectively he's sort of now a noble, maybe, kind of.
There's actually a funny note in the White Dwarf story where she's basically like, yeah, your deeds are good enough, you can marry a noble, let's get married.
Yep. She basically pardons him for all things that he might have done, which gives you that feeling that, well, what had he done then? Clearly, he'd been doing the Robin Hood thing and harrying the various tax collectors and similar with his bowmen of Bergerac. They were outlaws by this point, although the story really doesn't say it. It doesn't go, and they were outlaws doing all this stuff. No, it doesn't say that at all. It just basically goes, and the story continues on. The orcs are no longer much of a problem on the outside, but they are surrounding them completely. And then the monster turns up because the mum was doing something. Fuck knows what it was, but she did something bad. Big monster comes up, eats everyone. Game over, man, game over. And now Bertrand and his new wife are left in Bergerac. So surely they decide to settle Bergerac, right?
Yeah, so they all look at that burning castle and go, all right. And they fuck off. And there's an interesting note. Yeah, Bertrand does have a note of that. It's basically mentioned that because the castle burned down and because of everything that happened, there's a bit of a contentious, is he noble? And Bertrand basically goes, I don't want to deal with this. I don't want to deal with this. And I don't want to give up my bow. If I become a noble, then I would have to give up my longbow. And I love my longbow.
Yeah, because in Bretonia, when you become a noble, you've got vows that you have to swear because it's a core component of being a leader of men, the responsibility that's placed upon you as a noble. And one of those vows means that you can no longer use ranged weaponry. They're dishonorable. You must use close combat weapons. And that was antithetical to how Bertrand lived his life. He was a chap who loved his bow, and he was not going to pass it down, meaning he was not willing to take on those particular vows. I can imagine, if we're actually viewing this in reality, that there might have been a potentially deep conversation with him and his new wife as to how they're going to proceed, because the choice that they make is fucking mental. They're, loosely speaking, Bergerac at this point is being described as surrounded by greenskins. There are orcs on all sides. It is uninhabitable. That's how it's described. So they decide to leave. The truth of it is, though, that this uninhabitable area is where they had lived all of their lives. All of them, and it was so uninhabitable that they had made a successful attempt at holding off the greenskins, and they were no longer bothering them in the way that they were before. They didn't need to leave, they chose to. And they chose to because they figured they could make a better life out there as wandering outlaws going from place to place, like some sort of 1980s TV show, righting wrongs whenever they encounter evil. So if they arrive in a local barony, they and their merry band of men, all the peasants from their village et al., all the women, all the children, everybody else who's along with them, and it's probably not a small group, You're not talking like 30, 40 folk. It's probably a lot more than that. They arrive like this great wandering town. They spot local lords doing bad, and the background's pretty clear what they do. They kill them.
Yeah, so a couple of little interesting last notes, and then we're going to start pulling apart aspects of the story here in just a second. But a couple of last little interesting notes is that, like Andy said, they wander off into the forest all together. They take everybody with them. Like, the whole area is abandoned.
Everyone goes.
And they are, despite the daughter prince, it's called a princess story. She shouldn't be a princess. But
she shouldn't be a princess, but let's whatever. It's just a title.
She basically attempts to pardon everything that happened, but they are immediately branded as outlaws.
Yeah. The second they leave her land, her pardon means nothing, because it'll be whatever the local lords decide happens in their lands that matters.
Yeah, and they run around as this large group that is very good at not being found.
Somehow.
Somehow. They run around, like Andy said, fighting brigands, fighting beastmen, greenskins, and dealing with unsavory sorts that rule over peasants. And they offer a deal, which is that if your land is ever in trouble and they don't think you're a bad guy, they will fight for you under the condition that you do not tax your peasants for 1 year. That's how you pay him, is that you don't tax your peasants for a year, that part is genuinely very interesting.
Yeah, this entire section is very telling as to what they become, because the story of Bertrand le Brigand, moves from being one of an outlaw to being one of a champion of the people, and a champion of the people that many of the knights who are virtuous, noble, pure and strong, many of the nobles go, yeah, I'm on his side. But the other half of noble society goes, I'm not sure I am on his side. He's a fucking outlaw.
He's a murderer.
And he's a murderer. He has killed my second cousin and my second cousin's lover, the local sheep. He is a bad guy, and he needs to be taken down. And cut a long story short, he becomes a divisive figure. But he is a figure that's much more complicated than you might first think, because your first thought is, well, he's just a peasant outlaw. He's more than that, because he has been effectively ennobled and has not taken on a vow. So he is a dishonorable noble, but still to a degree a noble, who is married, if we go by the text, a princess. Now, if we go by the text, that means she's one of the highest ranking nobles that there is, other than the actual main dukes. That's also fascinating as a potential outcome, because there is a political connection here. He is a difficult figure. The Royarch himself is noted as saying that he wants to meet him to make his own mind up as to whether he's a good guy or a bad guy. He doesn't want to arrest him, but he wants to meet him. Other nobles, though, they send out questing knights after the fuckers.
Well, even
entire groups of them to hunt him down and kill him and all of the outlaws with them. Yet still, they go, and they go for long enough that the stories are they ask for this for at least a year and they stick with it, which means we're probably talking at least a decade, maybe 2 decades, at least, of them wandering around Britonia, hiding around in forests, killing greenskins, taking down corrupt nobles, effectively building up a big enough reputation that the king himself is speaking in court saying, I need to meet this man. This is no simple criminal, no simple outlaw. This is somebody who has become a mover and shaker in Bretonian politics, who is basically saying the king isn't doing his job at ensuring that the nobles are sticking to their vows. The people, the good people of Britonia, need us to do it in his stead. In many respects, you can see why the king is making a stance, because his authority is being challenged by the very reality of Bertrand and his big band that the peasants love. Really love and will uprise. And people who are looking for some sort of pre-revolutionary France almost have the first steps towards it with Bertrand the Brigand. He has become a figure that speaks to, we need to bring down this current establishment. And in many respects, it then makes you go, so where does this fit with the lady? The man who refuses to take vows. The man who does not become a part of the established cult of the lady. The man who stands apart from it all. Where is all of this fitting?
Yeah, and it's King Lewin. King Lewin.
It's King Lewin. King Lewin Lancashire.
Yeah, Lewin wants to meet him. Lewin, and just like other knights, now Lewin has told knights to bring him back
Correct.
to him, and has sent out knights, but no one's
And other
people have just tried to
unspecified, unnamed, so they never need to worry about it. But others have literally sent knightly assassins after him and his group.
Yep.
So if you can imagine Bertrand le Brigand and the sort of conflicts they're getting involved with, they're basically like the Incredible Hulk in that 80s TV show, or Highway to Heaven in that 80s TV show, or anything else, going from place to place, righting wrongs. They're like the A-Team, going from one town to the next town with their entire village. Fuck knows how that works. I imagine they sit somewhere else and the main group goes around wherever they're going, looking for trouble. They find trouble, and they try to fix that local trouble any way they can. And if that involves working with the local nobility, they are willing to do that. They're not anti-authoritarian per se. They are basically, we're good guys and we fight bad guys. And if you happen to be a bad guy, we will bring you down. And nobles don't like that, because the noble perspective is, you do what we say and that's it. And he says, no. We do what's right. And that's it, which is why he's so divisive, because many nobles just don't like anyone standing against their authority, regardless of how good or bad they are. Other nobles, though, particularly in Bretonnia, many of whom have sworn vows to literally put themselves in harm's way to protect anyone who fights for what is right and what is true. That's their raison d'etre. They have vowed to do this. And Bertrand comes along, and the local lord next door to him has just said, we're hunting that bastard down. Okay, he tried to kill my son. Okay, money on his head. And he goes, no. And he stops. And he walks out himself, because he's sworn a vow and stands before the incoming knights. You have to stop. I will protect this man. He was doing the lady's work. He was doing what's right and true. He is one of the most divisive figures that Bretonnia has to offer, because he is making Bretonians fight Bretonians in a way that, if he didn't exist, wouldn't happen. So there is an interesting set of questions that you can pose around this if you wish to do so.
Yeah, and I would further add that what's really unique and fun about him is this isn't like a Malobod situation where you have someone who's like, the lady is evil and I'm rejecting the system. I'm going to tear the whole system down. Like, he is a worshiper of the lady, and he works within the lady system. One of the things that's interesting is that we don't actually get the perspective of like what the damsels or the prophetesses or the Fey Enchantress think about him. But one of the things that's really interesting from like a religious schism idea is that, and this would probably be a matter of debate among certain figures in Bretonnia who are more of the faith inclined, so like your damsels, is that the concept of the lady's vows and the lady's faith is that there is a sacred pact between the knights and the peasantry, which is that the knights protect the peasantry, and the peasantry do the fields, and they produce food, and they give the best of everything that they have to the knights, so the knights can be in the best possible condition. And what Bertrand basically represents is that there are people on the knight side that are violating that contract, and he kills them for it. And the lady appears to not be trying to stop him.
But then again, we've already discussed this before. The lady doesn't stop this shit. We know this because of what happens over in Mousselon. The lady could have stopped the vast majority of what occurred there with her agents, but she purposely doesn't. If we take a look at Morgiana Le Fay, go check our last stream in Morgiana. Morgiana was in a position where she could have changed everything that occurred there, but she didn't, because everything is a teachable moment. As far as we can tell from the lady, everything is a moment where you've got to show your worth. You've got to prove yourselves. I'm not going to help you prove yourself. I'm going to give you all the tools to do it yourself, but it's your job to be the best you can be, not because I am there to support it and allow it to occur, but because you made it happen. And if that means you fall, then you fall. And because of that, Bretonnia is, if anything, even stronger. At least it should be. And Bertrand, you could argue, is another example of this. But on what side?
Yeah, one thing I want to add that's actually really interesting about Bertrand that's mentioned his original story is that when him and all of the people leave, they actually, raid's not the proper word, but they go to the local Grail Chapel and they take everything. Like they take all of the magical items and the shiny stuff. They pack everything up and they basically sack a Grail Chapel.
They do. Yeah, there's another interesting component to the story that I think is worth bringing up, because we sort of glided off it earlier when we were just doing the setup, and that's that the princess, she hasn't even got a name. It's fucking ridiculous. The princess's father is rumored to have been poisoned. And never have actually gone off on his great Grail passage in his attempt to. So he's rumored to have been poisoned by his wife. Now, what we have, let's build up all the component building blocks here, because we have a very clear. Do you want to say something else? What was that? Let's go to super chats first, because there's some stuff to say about this one.
Yeah. I think now we're gonna kind of flesh out what the narrative could be, and then we're gonna go to what the roleplay game added for like
the other bits.
The merry men are. Okay, so Hendrik, but is he a fish man? Sorry, Bowfoot. I don't think Bowfoot will be upset. No, he's not a fish man. He seems to be very much gillless. Barn, thank you very much. I've tried to make this knights being bad being more complicated by having a Bretonnian knightly order called the Children of the Lady, who are religious fanatics that enact the lady's will.
I would be less interested in building personally, Giles or Giles. Barnes sounds like Giles. Apologies if I completely minced your name. I would be less inclined to create knightly orders for Bretonnia, because of the way Bretonnia works already and doesn't really work off knightly orders. I would leave the knightly order system mostly to the Empire. It's a very imperial setup. And instead, I would go for political factions. For example, we don't need orders of anything to run politics in the UK or in the US or in any place. We just have political parties. And political parties are nothing more than expressions of certain points of view. And you tend to find before the political parties formed that instead it was just people had banks of thought, and people either supported the crown or didn't support the crown, or supported individuality or didn't. I would instead go with political groups that don't necessarily have a formal name, but you can definitely formalize with a name to understand it for yourself if you wish. But I would probably go for those over building something that's a direct, proper order. It formalizes it a bit too much. And if you're looking for a good name, often whoever is the strongest proponent of this view, they get named after him. Say, for example, one of them is called Charles. It's the Charlian way of dealing with this. And they're the Charlians. And that's often how these political groups first form. And later on, you might find out that real political groups form out of them. And what started off as an insult towards these political groups, like Whigs or Tories or whatever else in the UK, becomes the name of the actual party, colloquially, if not anything else, when it becomes properly formed. So I think here, my personal preference would be, instead of trying to make, this is the group that thinks this and they're fanatics, that creates monolithic blocks that are weird, because not everybody thinks the same thing within an organization. And instead build political factions, because that probably makes a slightly broader way of doing it. And you can say, these are the knights that think this way. These are the knights who sworn this vow and do very, very hard to live their life this way. These are knights who instead think this, and do lots of different factions, because then it feels more complicated and more real. Because if you think of you and all your friend groups and how they interact with each other, you probably got friends that you think are, stubborn or friendly or likely to support you no matter what you do. Others who will be dismissive and sit on the side. That doesn't mean that they're a knight of the lady. It just means they have a different view to you. And when you get people moving up onto the bigger scale, so rather than micro, a small friendship group, now moving to the macro, all the different groups that are working towards influencing an overall kingdom, they're similarly not normally formalized with such groups, unless it's a society that works off formalized groups, which, for example, the Empire does, but Bretonnia doesn't, which is why I try to avoid it.
Yeah, and I would say that when you're dealing with Bretonnia, remember that Bretonnia has a really strong concept of individualism when it comes to like the noble class and their knights. They don't tend to group up as much like that. It's much more about what's your personal journey, how far have you made it along like the path, and because of that, their human flaws tend to be very exaggerated. A lot of them live in bubbles before they go out to earn their knight errantry, and they're like, it's all glory and killing. And they think that serving the lady is just through the doing violence, which leads them down some really dark paths. A lot of Bretonnians, because they're so deeply sheltered and they're only educated on a very caste system, they are very cruel, arrogant people without having even the slightest realization that they are. Because they
just how they're brought up.
Because they just don't. They genuinely do not think of the peasants as human, and it's not.
I'm not sure that's the case for all.
Like some, but some, like,
definitely for some.
Yeah, if you read like the Black Library books, you'll get some characters that they're good guys, but the way they think of peasants is like shockingly bad.
Yeah, it really is.
And they're genuine good guys, but they just see them as so much lesser that it allows you to have this really complex set of villains. And like imagining in Bertrand's shoes of, you know, are you dealing with someone that is just young and stupid and can be educated? Or is it someone that is much more conniving and greedy and there's something deeper and worse going on there?
Yeah, totes.
But we'll talk about that in a little bit. Dumbass, so Bretonnia used to be more like pre-revolutionary France, but is there any way to bring 3 Musketeers type or unit characters to modern Bretonnia? Maybe something like Fencers as an elite light infantry unit similar to High Elf Rangers.
So I would not like to do that. There's several reasons why. One, it's not pre-revolutionary France. It only was in a single book, and that was Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay First Edition. Almost every other iteration of Bretonnia has always been knights, honorable knights doing honorable things.
Also, for anyone that's confused, by the way, just to give some further context, First Edition Warhammer to y'all would be completely unrecognizable. It's not just that Bretonnia was super weird. Everything was super fucking weird.
I don't know. The Empire was largely the Empire we know today. First edition, it was a very strong template for many parts.
There are Native Americans. There are Redskins in that book.
Is there?
Yeah, there is.
Wow. Okay, I don't remember that. There you go. Wow. Okay, yeah, missed that one. But anyway, that's the only book where they really are shown. And other than that, it's not really a thing. And there are several established groups of fencers already in the Warhammer world, and you tend to find that when you're trying to create something interesting and new, you don't dial into the things that other people already have. Estalian Destros, for example, they're marked. Valencor, all of his crazy schools of fencing over in the Empire.
I'd go with Stallion.
However, you could easily, instead of going down the fencing route, definitely go with the more musketeer-y, middle-classy route if you want to do so. But they're not going to be royal guards of any king or any equivalent, because that's not how it works. So thus, yeah, if you're going to do it, learn from Games Workshop. Games Workshop ported everything English over into France. Let's start porting everything French over into Estalia. I'm sure the Spanish people wouldn't mind.
Hieronymus, so you're saying Bertrand is just Kevin Costner because he's from the 90s and listens to Bryan Adams?
Everything I do it for you. Yeah, sure. It's exactly that.
So it's on the height thing. Do you think Elf Mini should be the same height as Primarch Marine? Oh, Primaris for me, Marines. Also, yes, we saw your super chat about the side.
Yeah, if you consider that your average elf is approximately almost a head taller than your average human, then it should be that much taller. It would make the elf models look like elves rather than just looking like often relatively squat people, because you've always got that weird thing with miniatures where they make the head bigger so that you can actually paint it, and it doesn't look weird. And when you do that on a relatively squat looking body, everything looks short when you actually look at it in exclusion. Some of the Age of Sigmar models do not suffer from this to anywhere near the same degree, but they're using old models for the old world, so this is just going to be something that happens.
So Brilliant Bloodweaver, Bertrand Tragedy attempts to fight mistreatment of peasants by cultist Duke, but is turned into a beast of Givaudan?
That's an interesting one.
By cult to paint him as chaos, and the royalty buys it and is harsher on peasants.
So I think that if you look at the story as a whole, then many of the local nobles are going to look at him as a figure of chaos, because he is bringing chaos into their domains. Their fiefdoms were solid and clean. Their peasants were doing what they were told. Everything was great. And then suddenly he arrives. Some perceived ill is spun. And then the knights who were patrolling, holding off against beastmen are suddenly... Yeah, thanks very much. I appreciate it. They're now getting raided. The knights, the tax collectors are being raided. Everything is going wrong. Guerrilla warfare started in their otherwise peaceful thief. They complain to the king, and the king responds with something like, sort it to yourself. We've heard he might actually be only, persecuting bad guys. Are you a bad guy? What the fuck? No, I'm just doing my fucking job. This is what I do. I'm a noble. This is my land. This is how I work it. He is to many not just a divisive figure. He is a figure of pure evil. Yeah, and that, I think, is interesting.
From their perspective, he's literally using beastman tactics.
Yeah.
Like, he fights like a beastman.
Yeah. He fights dishonorably. He fights at range as a preference. He does everything that the lady says you shouldn't do.
Yeah. He sets traps.
Yeah.
Ambushes. Like, he literally, messes with the forest routes. So when your horse and wagon with all the tax money's coming through, it crashes and the horse's legs break. And it's horrible. It's a horrible form of warfare from a
absolutely
perspective.
So from the rulership's perspective, he is a figure of chaos, probably large C chaos for many of them too. He will be portrayed by many as pure evil, in the same way that he will portray the ruling nobility that he perceives to be the bad guys as also pure evil.
Grim Isaac, what if Nuffles...
Okay, here we go.
Nuffle steals the Big Four for Blood Bowl. Something's there but powerless. Oh man!
Oh no! Man, too many.
Grim
Isaac, you have really shortened this post out. I'm old.
Chaos gets Colt's there but powerless. Before something, Chaos Gate safe. Bellicor.
Oh, okay. Chaos Gate safe.
Something and sane.
Insane, but Sith. Chaos Dwarf / Hashit safe. Morgar / Beastman safe. Skaven / Greyhorn Rat safe, Naga safe, Nekoho more powerful? I don't know. Nuffle steals the Big Four for Blood Bowl. That's clear.
That was a
toughie.
lot of short forms.
That was a bit too many short forms for me to fully understand what's there. I fully understand you might have a character limit. That being the case, perhaps... I don't know. Say it slightly differently.
Okay, so if Nuffle removed the Big Four,
right, gotcha. And instead we got other gods in their place. That could be interesting. Although we're not really talking Blood Bowl in general, but yeah, that could be really interesting.
That it would be funny to have Nuffle just randomly come and grab them for a night out. They just have no choice in the matter. He's like, y'all gotta get outside. Dono Man made Marion. Nope. Made Sync Minutes.
5 minutes.
Oh my God. Stephen Lucas, classic anime plot. Most competent gov agent fighting the apocalypse, but the greatest enemy is always the higher ups, constantly self-sabotaging.
Yeah, so Stephen, I think there's actually possibly how far behind are we in the super chats? Because this might be a good chat to bounce from.
We can bounce from here. That's fine.
We'll bounce from here. Okay, so you're right. The Bertrand the Brigand story is such a classic stereotype that it's almost painful. And that stereotype is he's Robin Hood riding through the glens. Robin Hood with his yeah, totally. It's exactly what it was. Did you not get it?
No.
With his merry men, he's robbing from the rich. He's giving to the poor. He's doing all this stuff, but. We also know there's more to this story because he's a divisive figure amongst the nobles. Why? Because he stands against many of them and indeed has even killed ruling nobles, which is like the highest crime in the land. What the fuck is going on here? We know some facts about the ruling family of Bergerac. We know this, that they are somehow corrupted, that the daughter whom he has with him at all times, was somehow caught up in this monster ritual and somehow survived because of what happens. I'm going to pitch a slightly different version of the story. This is the first of what is almost certainly going to be many different varieties that we can have here.
Oh boy, here we go.
Okay, so this is number one. Okay, and I'm going to use some language that some people might feel slightly uncomfortable, so trigger warning. Our favorite Robin Hood, Bertrand the Brigand, was groomed. He was groomed by a lady in the tower who saw a figure that she could use to destabilize Bretonnia. Her mother and she are of the direct line of Mousillon, and that's pretty much established potential fact. And she used that because she started spreading the rumors. Her mother's fine. Her brother is an absolute arsehole under her influence. And she is ultimately the architect of all of the horror, the pushing of the greenskins into the area, because if they were surrounded by greenskins, they'd all be dead. The greenskins are being pushed by outside forces that she's in contact with. They are in one of the darker parts of Bretonnia anyway. Not hard to push them around as long as you've got contacts out there. She is not the figure that's portrayed. She is someone who is looking to destabilize Bretonnia for her own vengeful ends. That's why she's not given a name, because we're going to create in this version at least, an entirely new character, because they didn't build one. All we get is, oh, she took after her brilliant father while the son took after the evil mother. Quite literally what it says.
Yes.
She is the paragon of good, and he was the paragon of evil. He was taxing and doing all these terrible things. No, he's just an impressionable kid. That's all he is. An impressionable kid who's either being impressed upon by the mother or the sister. Because we have another figure there who is in a very clear position of potentially impressing upon him a particular way of living. She pitches him as the bad guy that effectively riles up the peasants. And she grooms those peasants over the course of multiple years, threatening them from the outside, making the knights look bad, holding them in place within the castle until eventually they rebel and save her from the very creature that she has summoned. And then she says, we have to go. We can't stay here. It's too embattled and too endangered. Now we get an answer for why the fuck they left. Because it makes no sense. If they could hold off the greenskins for the last 20 years without any problems at all, they don't need to leave. They don't. They can hold off. They can shore themselves up in a new castle, build one if necessary, protect their homes. Because that's what they are. They're peasants. They don't travel. They don't wander around from the forest from one place to the next. They have changed as a people. As a group, they have had to be moved from what they were into something new. And the figure that did that was Bertrand. But why did Bertrand do it? We got another potential story coming for a different version of Bertrand. But in this first version, we've got a figure who has clearly got an opportunity to turn them into what they become, which is one of the most destabilizing parties in Bretonnia. There is nothing like this. Nobles are fighting nobles. Peasants are uprising across Bretonnia in a way they weren't. They are the new agitators. They are the new freedom fighters against the tyranny of what is ultimately a group of nobles who swear oaths to protect people. And they have been turned into the evil bad guy by this group. And they are finding examples of that because of human nature. There's always going to be examples. And they're using those single examples to say they're all like this. Nobles are bad. We've even got one with us. That is one reinterpretation of a story that completely matches everything that we have and allows us to add a bit of complexity to it. Now, if you want to add proper complexity, you wouldn't make this chaos. Because chaos would be the story that Games Workshop always chooses. Now, as I say, this story is too stereotypical. It's too Robin Hood. It's too obvious. So whenever Warhammer is telling a story, we always try to look at it and say, what can we do to make this interesting, exciting? And ultimately, the story here would be the story of Bertrand figuring out that he's being used. And how does he respond from this? My only issue with this version, and I have a pretty strong issue with it, is that it does the classic, the only female character is a witch.
Yeah,
No, the rebels are bad guys. I mean, they're not the bad guys. They're being used. And that's not quite the same story. The issue I have with this version of it, we went with it, would be that it would cast the only female character in the story as yet another female witch bad guy, which is how most of them are used. So we fall into a different stereotypical hole. But the reason I bring up this one is that ultimately we have got stories from Games Workshop that they themselves would take in a new direction. If they took this, they would just polish off the edges of Bertrand the Brigand and do what they always do, which is, he's a hero. And the group with him's a hero. And now we're going to add our Maid Marian equivalent and add her to the unit, because that's generally what they do when they build their battle game. And she'll now be sitting on the front line. And possibly she's also been oddly blessed by the lady and has some miracles she can use because they can't help themselves. They always try to add that extra element on, where when we're doing it from more narrative side rather than the war game side, you tend to look at it and say, what can we do to take the story, not invalidate what came before, but add complexity and depth. And in this case, I would probably really lean on the Mousillon angle a little bit stronger if you went with this version. And you would say that it is really a really upset, disenfranchised noble from Mousillon who doesn't believe that everything that happened in the past was evil and wrong, because they've got their own stories that were handed down to them. They believe that they were in the right because everyone's a hero in their own story. And she is ultimately looking for a way to destabilize Bretonnia and maybe even reclaim Mousillon for themselves and bring it back to its former glory. That would be one way of taking it. I wouldn't choose this story, though, which is one of the reasons why I picked this one first. I think it's a good one, and I would choose it for a roleplay game. Definitely for a roleplay game. But I wouldn't choose it for the story that I would tell if I was controlling Warhammer, for example. But I think it adds a lot of complexity to an otherwise relatively boring story of yet just a Robin Hood copy-paste. Now we've got ourselves a group that are being manipulated and used to try and bring down the central core pillars of what Bretonian society is. And they think they're doing good work. And they are. That's the important part of what makes this story work. The rebels are not bad guys. They are good guys. And they're being manipulated because of their morals, because of what they stand for, to cause division. And in many respects, it's a lovely metaphor for left-wing politics as a whole, where left-wing politics tend to go, I'm just better than you at doing this. See, you can't do that over there. No compromise. Where they often spend more time attacking each other than they do the people who should be the target point of their vitriol for their different belief standpoints. So that would be one way of doing it.
Yeah, that would be that would actually work very well as a very interesting. I think in many ways they'd be a rival almost to Malabad. But is she the most beautiful ever? They don't directly say that, but probably. I think they actually say something along those lines. But
so yeah, I think me personally, if you wanted to run with this story, the novel would be she is basically a bad guy who is converted to good guy by the end. So there's a longer story here where Bertrand Le Brigand and what she's standing for, effectively, he wins her over to his view, which is doing it for the good reasons, as she sees all the good that's potentially coming from it, as she sees what they're doing as not necessarily what she originally pitched it as. But there's going to be a horrendous bit when he finds out potentially her true character. How does that unfold? It's awful.
The fun there especially would be how their story, like, especially if they're ending up going towards that Mousillon arc, what happens when they clash with Malabad? Malabad being like, hey, we should be on the same team, but seeing just what he's willing to do in order to have victory, which is like a way against their moral code. Even though I
also think quite interesting as well when what Malabad would refuse them, and also our princess has also moved her position, because everybody grows through the course of telling stories, and her initial standpoint will develop through what eventually becomes, it starts off of, I'm using Bertrand to get what I want, which is why she is the one who initiates the relationship. It's a nice way of twisting that particular relationship at its starting point, because she was the one that was lusting down from the tower. Or alternatively, she was the one that was watching him from afar and figuring out how best to turn him into what she needs. And then through her exposure to him, the marriage, all the things that they do together, she shifts her position to actually know the work that Bertrand and I are doing is more important than what we set it up for. But you have that moment, the classic stakeout moment or spy moment in any one of those movies, where they go, the only reason I've come over is because I've been staking you out. I'm in fact spying on you, and somehow I'm now in a relationship with you, and you've just found out that I'm actually a spy. But that happened naturally. I'm not a bad guy. That's sort of that moment. I've fallen in love with you, Bertrand. I believe in everything you believe in. It started off wrong, but now I'm here. What do we do? So yeah, there's lots of fun parts to this, but it's quite different to she has a an evil purpose that must be seen through, and turns into she is somebody who grows just like everybody else does through the story. And I think that could be more fun.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's
interesting that just to bring up this one, just to say to Rathi, or alternatively Marathi too. No, Marathi never changes her view. Marathi never changes, and arguably through the way we pitched her, her love made her make a mistake from her core central desire. Where in this one it would be the character would develop through the course of it. Quite a different potential storyline there. Again, just with that one version of the telling of it.
Yeah, and there are a lot of other like little things that could be picked out for people that want to like explore various ideas as well as the story. Like one of the things that I kind of thought about that could be interesting is when you're dealing with like, why are the greenskins like around the outer area, but they're not like swarming in the greenskins standardly do. You could run with the idea that the Baroness isn't as evil as she's portrayed. Of that, what if it's her magic that actually keeps the greenskins at bay? What if there is a desperation of trying to survive against a Wa by using terrible sorceries that eventually get out of her control? And she wasn't actually this horrible evil thing, but was doing what had to be done in order to survive, but it goes out of control, and then then the greenskins, because she dies, because in one version, in the original White Dwarf story, she gets nommed by the thing that comes out. But there's another version of the story where her and her son are burned alive by Bertrand, where he kills them, not the monster. And you could have kind of an interesting dynamic there of that they weren't actually the bad guys, but just caught in a really ugly situation. And because of their death, the land does become uninhabitable because that defense, whatever that magical defense that was there, is severed.
Yeah, so before we dive into our next set of super chats, I think that we could then twist this entire story on its head yet again. One version of this is that from the very real fact that we have a story that effectively creates division in Bretonia, because that's what happens from this. And that is big C chaos, no matter how you look at it. Bertrand can be easily pitched, and I mean really, really easily pitched as corrupted. Easily. He entices the daughter. He is responsible for holding off the orcs. His magical powers and his weird access to sudden artifacts. He is a well-connected individual who has got probably a chip in his shoulder and is very much looking to make big C change. And he has arrived in Bergerac because of the princess, the fact that she's single and is from a very influential line, and he intends to use her. Very possibly he is he's responsible for whatever corruption lies at the heart of the castle. There is a different way to tell the story with a very different version of the characters. And you can do this with almost any of them. I mean, you can take Hugo Le Petit and do something with him. You can take Guy Le Gros and do it with him if you prefer. There's lots of different stories that you can tell, and I think whenever we are looking at an older Games Workshop character,
he raided the Grail Chapel, for God's sake.
Exactly. He raided a Grail Chapel. He refuses to take vows. Refuses. His bow is more important than the people he's trying to save. His bow is more important than sitting down and protecting the people who travel with him. He could have the entirety of the state behind him, as much as the state means anything in the realms of Bretonia. But he would have the entire state religion behind him. He does not do that. He's proud. He refuses. He wants to continue to fight from the forest line. He wants to shoot people from a range and murder them. He is not a good guy if you wish to go down that route. Again, there's different routes we can take, but it is a very easy route to look at the Bertrand Le Brigand character and say, hey, this character that we have, he is not a good guy. He is standing against the religion of the lady, who is a religion that is objectively, even if you're looking at it at the top as being a manipulative religion, which it is as a cult, no matter how you look at it, you can say one thing for certain: if you follow it, you are a good guy, almost objectively a good guy, and you stand hard against chaos. because it's quite clear it's pretty much one of the strongest anti-chaos religions that there is, and it creates exceedingly powerful anti-chaos fighters. They're very, very good at what they do, and the focus on close combat utterly disarms one of the primary weapons that chaos have, because chaos fucking nails in close combat. It's what they really, really, really do well. And the Bretonnian lifestyle from day one is nail it. Personal combat, be better. Personal combat, you got to be good at combat. Shooting won't bring them down, because sometimes a Chaos champion gets right back up after a cannon shot to the head. Not good enough. You've got to nail close combat, because that's where the fight is going to be come the end times. Bretonnia is built to be anti-chaos. It's quite obvious if you look at it. And Bertrand the Brigand is small c and potentially big C chaos knifing into that. Now, if you wanted to use that as a story, that for me is Bertrand as an example of an end time story. How he was in fact a plant from the beginning to destabilize the strength of Bretonnia, and when the end times come, for Bretonnia to be much weaker and allowed to be what eventually becomes to Bretonnia. It's fucked in the end times. There has to be a reason why it gets fucked. There has to be a reason, and if you want a reason, use one of the characters Games Workshop has discarded and make it useful and interesting. And that'd be one way to tell a different story, because Bertrand is discarded. He's just Robin Hood. Fuck that. Let's make him Evil Hood as a different option. He's Chaos Hood. He is very much trying to bring about the end times, and he's purposely utilizing everything around him, and he's the reason the Greenskins weren't attacking, rather than or possibly the witch that is the mum is the reason. And he's working with her. There's lots of different ways that could work. Okay, the daughter is basically being used by Tzeentch. There's lots of cool ways we could retell the story that way. But as a goal, you've got to remember that if we are telling that as a whole story, we've got to figure out how that ends with, if we stick with the end times, the destruction of Bretonnia. And Bertrand is either going to be a figure on one side or the other. Because Games Workshop's discarded him and they have no use for him, we could do something that Games Workshop hates doing, which is taking one of their good guys and legitimately making them bad.
Yep. Plus, there's just a lot of fun unanswered questions about him. Where the fuck does he get a dragon tooth from? Those aren't just hanging around.
Totally. I mean,
those are
there's
serious.
A story there.
That's a serious fucking weapon. What did he take from the Grail Chapel? It says he takes sacred relics, but it doesn't say what he takes.
And we get no list of them in their artifact choices that they can take. So, I mean, what the fuck even are they? They have clearly stolen something. And with both of those varieties of the stories, just to conclude this one, on one side, it would be largely guided by the daughter, and it wouldn't be for chaos reasons, it would be for political reasons, ultimately. That's what it boils down to. But in the greater scheme of the theater of Warhammer, it would ultimately be Big C chaos. She's corrupted. She's not working with any god in particular. She's not dead. She's just corrupt.
Actually, make her a character. Yeah, that'd be nice.
Yeah, totally. Tied to Mousselon, and she's the one who basically feeds Bertrand all the things that he needs to become what he becomes, and convinces him to turn his back on the idea of becoming a noble knight, convinces him to raid the chapel, convinces him to do everything that needs to be done to set him up to be this divisive figure in Bretonnia. Or the flip side, it's just fucking chaos.
Yep. All right, we got a lot of super chats to get through, and then we're going to talk about what the roleplay game evolved his squad into, basically. Yeah. Psych. These guys sound like Robert Baratheon as the Baron, Cersei and Joffrey as the wife and son, and then Robert de Grail is canon. You could do that if you want.
Yeah, you've done it, Psych. It's happened.
Martin de Crescent, the original Flappy Bird. Yeah,
this creature, this literal one-eyed massive monster that rises out, it feels like a plot device rather than something that happens, because it's dropped like almost a Deus Ex Machina into the middle of it. We need to make the story happen.
Yeah, once again, to be 100% transparent, its literal name is Great Flapping Monster of Chateau Mall. Like, what?
Yeah, it feels like a tool, not just a ritual gone wrong. Ritual gone wrong is the obvious option. It feels like Bertrand is either being set up or is setting something up himself, both of which work. or a different story entirely. And we can easily go for a third option, but we've only got so much time.
Yeah,
Let's get into our super chats.
She's summoning demons, and she summoned a big demon, and but you could do a lot of.
That's the obvious story. The last story, if we're going to stick it on just 3, is the story that it actually tells, which is the mother is bad, the daughter is good, the son has gone bad, the daughter is trapped, Bertrand, shining peasant that he is, somehow gets hold of some random magical artifacts, fuck knows how, kills the big, huge, massive Flappy Bird monster that's summoned by the mum for reasons that are unspecified. This is the actual story, but yes. Hey, let's just run with it. Saves the daughter, who gets who gets caught, pardon me, by Hugo Le Petit. They all run off into the forest with the entire village and then wander around Bretonnia righting wrongs. That's the actual story. And if you like that story, run wild with it, because it's quite a fun one. But it is a story that we've heard many times before in TV shows and all similar, which is why I've offered...
Add some spice.
Yeah. That's why I've added 2 completely different potential readings. One where Bertrand is a bad guy, and one where the unnamed noble lady is a bad guy.
Markai, first super chat. Well, welcome and thank you so much.
Hey,
my
so much.
Crescent Knight hero back when Lorebeards was an alpha. And once again, I heed the lady's call. Cheers for all you do, lads. Oh man, I assume you mean like back when we did like painting stuff. That was a long time ago. That was like 3 years ago now. Welcome back.
You're old, dude.
Yeah, I know. Bones, one could imagine Bertrand is the lady's blessing, keeping his band hidden from and making sure its nobility are acting justly, not too mean. I mean, there's an argument that if, Ladriel is the best at hiding things, and if Ladriel does indeed favor them and the mists conceal them, then no one's gonna fucking find them if the lady does not want them to be found.
I agree, but I would hard not do that story. Hard not do that one, Bones. You absolutely could, and it would fit, particularly if you're going with Bertrand and his band are just a bunch of wandering good guys being really nice, and the knights are sort of in the wrong. But Bertrand is a figure who repeatedly turns his back on what the lady represents and even sacks one of her chapels and takes all of the artifacts for whatever uses and nefarious purposes, or just to sell it for extra cash to feed his people.
Maybe protect it if you want to be generous, but yeah.
And the lady herself tends to be sort yourself out and pray to me if you wish. She doesn't just randomly protect people unless they genuinely come to her, or you happen to be Gilles Le Breton at the beginning of time. Other than that, it tends to be people who have followed in her footsteps and shone by their own capability and might, and then she appears to them. She's never appeared to him. She's never, arrived. The lady generally arrives first, and that's never occurred. So I would be very careful about just randomly choosing that the lady favors this one just because. However, that doesn't mean Bertrand can't use all of the advantages that the lady drops. In Bretonnia, it's a far mistier place, particularly beside watery areas. Watery forests are literally a nightmare to find anybody in. That's just the nature of the local area that you find yourself in, the environment. And I think he would make maximum use of that. That is arguably, and from the outside, many might even say that means he has the lady's blessing, and that could form part of the dialogue about him. He clearly has the lady's blessing. They keep coming out of the mists, and the reality of it is, no, they just hide in mist because mist is a good place to hide.
Smart, yeah.
It is smart. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I mean, you could even explore because remember that Bretonnia isn't monotheistic. That Bertrand has a much stronger relationship with Tal and Raya or Renaud than he does with the lady.
Yeah, totally.
Hendrik gives me Luther Huss vibes. Very specific. I would only say really in the sense of how the boss feels about him. So how Leon Leoncar talks about him versus how Volkmar talks about Luther Huss. That has a similar vibe, but other than that, it's pretty meh. Yeah,
I'm not sure I'd say Luther Huss vibes in particular.
I
could argue a reading of that with that though.
Yeah,
I could argue a reading with that.
Yeah.
If, for example, if we made Bertrand a figure of the lady, and a figure of the lady who was fighting against others because of what he believes is their misuse of the lady's blessings, then we could start going down you're doing it wrong. You're doing religion wrong, man. But I don't think that's really how Bertrand Le Brigand is pitched. He's more pitched on a more moral perspective. Morally, I think you're in the wrong. And morally, I have to do something to stop your oppression of these peasants, to stop you being the evil figure that I believe you are, to stop you killing people in the fields because you happen to be a greenskin or a beastman or whatever else that he happens to be facing off against. He's largely a moral figure rather than a religious figure.
Morning, Crescent. The lady says to pull yourself up by your bootstraps.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the lady very much leaves them to deal with it themselves using the individual gifts and capabilities they have, because ultimately every single last one of them is being trained for the biggest wars to come.
Cole said, Bertrand having a unique relationship to the city makes a lot of sense to me. In some of the oldest tales, Robin Hood is very deeply devoted to the Virgin Mary. Yeah, if you wanted to steal that part from Robin Hood's story, you could.
Yeah, you absolutely could. It does change the nature of Bertrand's character. But if you're going down that route, then if he has got a very strong relationship with the lady, what is it? What is his relationship? Why has he turned his back on the lady and not accepted vows? Does he not believe he's worthy? But if he doesn't believe he's worthy, why did he accept the marriage to the noblewoman? If he was a strong believer in the lady's practices, he would have refused that marriage, because what she represents to Bretonnia as a whole. She could marry another knight, which would be better for the people. Another strong figure would come in and protect them, but he doesn't do that. He seems to be a figure who's much more venal, much more interested in his own story. And his own story is, I'm in love with this woman and I want to marry her, but I'm proud enough that I'm going to turn my back on everything that she believes in terms of what is right and wrong religiously. And now we're going to raid a Grail chapel. It doesn't feel like it's a natural religious story, but that doesn't mean it isn't. And if we wanted to take on those aspects, we absolutely could, but we would probably be taking on a far more rebellious story. He has a very unique view of what the lady is, and he is trying to find his own route towards it. In many respects, he's on his own Grail quest and doing what is right, regardless of what he is pressed up against, and regardless of how dishonorable they fear he is. And it would be effectively, if it was to be concluded, the Grail Knight quest that ended up with him becoming a Grail Knight with a bow.
Yeah, which would, can of worms.
Yeah.
Well, I just want to pull out this comment because it was just something I want to add to it. I think having Lewin be more supportive of Bertrand would be a fun story. Like Lewin sends supplies on occasion, but publicly he can't support him. That's making Lewin out of character. I don't think it is. Lewin, so we were talking about this during the tier list stream, that there are one of the other Grail Knights, one of the other Dukes is suspicious of Lewin because Lewin keeps acting morally as opposed to the letter of the law.
Yep.
So I would say this would support Lewin's character, not detract from it, and could threaten his position as king if it was found out.
Hard. I so hard agree. It's a great comment. And I think it really speaks to the potential weakness in the Bretonnian court should the king be found out to be effectively supporting a murderer. It could destabilize
nobles.
Yeah, exactly. It could destabilize his rule completely in a way that might even force Morgana Le Fay to have to come out and say, you done wrong, dude. And you have to live by your choices. You're going to have to be removed. And Luon is a fucking great king. Yeah, what sort of victory would that be for whomever it is that's behind Bertrand, assuming you want to put someone behind Bertrand?
Yeah, you could have a very interesting story where Bertrand and Lewin's, like, they could both be very morally good people, but because of their support of one another, it causes functionally a civil war.
Yeah.
Despite the fact that they're good people. Which would be really spicy and fun.
Yeah.
On this side, what's the Duke de Carcassonne think him? Since the Duke has the Bertrand du Guesclin, guerrilla pragmatism vibes, I guess he likes him more than most. So it would depend on probably what Bertrand's been up to in that area. So the Duke of Carcassonne is much more practical than a lot of his fellow Dukes. But that doesn't
mean he might just wail on him hard.
Yeah, if anything, it might mean that he uses much more horrific tactics to deal with the likes of Bertrand Le Brigand.
So on this side, I'm going to use real world politics, which I don't like doing, but it gives you a good idea of where my angle's coming out here.
It's fine. I'm here to die. It's fine.
You should do it all the time. It's actually hilarious. It's not that hilarious, but it kind of is. People who think the same things constantly bicker and argue, and often become the biggest enemies. Take any political party in the world, just take any of them. Think about your local political party and think about its leader. Now think about someone in that party who stands against them. They think the same. They might think and agree on 99% of the same stuff, but that 1% difference can be enough to tear them apart. Just because two people have got similar methods to doing things in no way means they will ever agree. In fact, this is the real world political reference. Take a look at the formation of the new political party here in the UK, where on the left wing, they looked at the Labour Party and went, you're not left enough. Jeremy Corbyn, the previous leader of the Labour Party, tries to form a new party with, and now I've forgotten her name. I had her literally in my head a second ago, with another ex-Labour member party whose name suddenly escaped me. If anyone's in the chat got her name, that'd be great. And what was the first thing they did? Fell out. They are massively aligned on almost everything, but they had differences in how they should best execute. Say, thank you very much, Zara. I couldn't remember her name. Zara Sultana. She's brilliant. Thanks very much. So Zara, and the pair of them agree on almost everything. The first thing they did was they disagreed fundamentally on how things should be done. She saw him and his network of friends as an old boys club. He saw her and what she was attempting to do is trying to take control and do things differently. There's lots of differences they had, but ultimately they thought the same stuff. And yes, as it stands, they've sort of got over their differences. But this in many respects shows how hard it is to get people to work together sometimes, and why certain groups of people, particularly those who have got something they're fighting for, will fight tooth and nail over minutiae that often don't matter. And that minutiae is what brings down these groups. And Bertrand, in many respects, is a figure who overrides that sort of thinking, because he is a leader who says, no, we're just going to do what we have to do, regardless. You either stay with me or go. And most stay with him. He's a charismatic man. And the picture that I did for him, I pitched him in his slightly later years to show that he'd been through and built up that reputation. And the next part of what our stream is going to be about, which is what comes after, what some of the repercussions of what he's done. The roleplay game runs with this a little bit. And that requires him to be a little bit older, which is why I did a slightly older picture of him.
God sent me to make shit worse. Haha, me too. Idea, could the Bretonni be descendants of slaves the elves left after the War of the Beard?
There is no indication that the elves of the old world were taking human slaves in the old world at that point.
Yeah,
but there's no indication they weren't.
Yeah, I would say you could do this, and I would be like, you're not stretching that much, that's fine.
Yeah.
Second, though, it probably wouldn't be the Bretonny, it would probably be just whoever the native peoples were of these lands. But the Bretonny came from the east. Yeah.
This is not the story that the Bretonny would say, but that doesn't mean it's not true.
Yeah. Zach Wells, love the show. Couldn't have gotten through painting my army without you both the background. Oh, well, thank you.
Hey, great, Zach. Absolutely delighted that you enjoy painting away to us.
Ricky Chapman, we met Bertrand. Oh, Ricky Chapman.
Here we go, Ricky. What's it going to be this week?
In a campaign near Montfort, where we were hired by the Empire to investigate missing merchants. Turns out that while the Duke was fighting orcs, a giant had come and was eating the peasants, and Bertrand was hunting it. Well, that sounds like a Bertrand job, all right.
Yeah, it really does. And who doesn't like campaigning near Montfort anyway? So yeah, sounds good.
Mm-hmm. Stephen Lucas, is the Bertrand is used story, but the lady had a hand in this, seeing she needed another force outside the Knight's Code.
So again, I don't think the lady necessarily pushes in that way. I think you're giving her too much agency in what happens in Bretonia. The Bretonia that we have is largely built by Bretonians and those influencing them, and they call upon the lady, and when she is called upon by those she deems worthy, she answers. But she is not actively directing them in quite the way that this seems to suggest.
Yeah, what I would add is, so think of the lady like this. The only time the lady has gone out of her way to show herself to someone is when the land of Bretonia is in deep, deep shit. Mm-hmm. So like when Gilles of Breton, like when they're dealing with all that crap, she shows up. When Karn,
by many respects, that's her first time though. So in some respects, this is I'm now starting my plan. So it's not even, that's not even a good example of it, because that's starting things.
The only genuine example I can think of her like actually tipping a scale was when Karn the Blighted comes down, kills the king, and starts taking over Bretonia with his plague fleet, and she goes to Rapunzel and says, "Hey,
go!
What you doing?
Yeah,
I need you." Like, that is genuinely the only time I can think of where she seems to push somebody. And it was
that just Rapunzel's natural character having a moment to shine?
Yeah, who knows? Maybe she was just Morning Crescent. For me, I'd look at why the mother was secluding her daughter away. Gosh, why might a Bretonian noble hide their daughter away from the service of the lady, a magic user? Then you can unwind this as a cautionary tale in that line from the nobles to one another.
Yeah, you could definitely make an argue that the daughter is perhaps a witch. It would be a standard story to take, and that the greenskins and all the monsters and all the rest of it around it are effectively there to help protect her daughter, her bloodline, from the arrival of the lady's minions. And the daughter has been taught, as has the son, that the lady and their various rules and the rights and responsibilities of the nobility are not correct. Yeah. Which would then lead to, afterwards, the raiding of the Grail Chapel making sense because it's influenced by the daughter's beliefs as well. You definitely could run down that route, and I don't think it would be a bad story. Basically, they're bad sorts, and the girl's a witch.
Yeah, we did it, Patrick. We saved Bretonia.
Yeah, you're not wrong. There's a part of me that quite likes the idea that Bertrand the Brigand is ultimately responsible for the downfall of Bretonia.
It would be there's a lot of fun you can have with it. Omnicide 101. How dare you say leftist and fighting is bad idea? I'm splitting the party over this.
Oh man, it's being a pretty hard lefty person myself, which none of you will be surprised by. It's one of the things that just makes me laugh and cry the most. How absolutely rubbish they are at doing pretty much everything sometimes.
Laughs an American. Super Arlock. I mean, an interesting way to spin that is the lady doesn't favor either Bertrand or the nobles, but is instead sharpening them against each other, making the peasants nastier and the nobles. So, man, y'all really want an active lady, huh?
This isn't necessarily an active lady. I actually think that this is almost accurate. I mean, an interesting way to spin this, that the lady doesn't favor either Bertrand or the nobles. The lady gives her favor, obviously, all over the place to those who are worthy. So she does give favor. But that doesn't mean, if we now remove it from what she does, from what she thinks, because we know she's Ladriel, the Lady of Mists. We know that she is ultimately a liar who finds lost things, and she's seeking to find these people who are lost. They were about to die, and bring them into something brilliant. And Bertrand and the nobles, and all of them, are sharpening each other. They are doing this. So when they go bad, while she might not give them her favor directly, they are still providing a necessary component to making the rest of Bretonia stronger, or possibly weaker in the short term, and then stronger in the long run as they're defeated. So, yeah, I don't think this is necessarily a bad reading. I don't think it's that far away from what is probably happening.
Yeah, okay, we're going to do a few more, and then we've got to get into the roleplay.
Sure.
Because we're running low on time. Kobo, oh sweet, a warrior character who rebels against authority without being corrupted by chaos or flesh-eating aliens from outer space. Andy, but what if he got groomed by his girlfriend to become Robin Hood?
Yeah, I'm not that keen in making Bertrand the Brigand a figure of chaos. I always present it as an option because you always have to say the world gets destroyed by chaos. So what does that mean here? Because that is what ultimately happens. But I think I don't think that a reading of this character, which is we have got ourselves someone who starts corrupted and then comes to learn that she's, through her deeds, she's changing, and her views have changed, and how that might doom her relationship with the person that she has come to love over time. I think that makes for an interesting potential story, particularly if it's picked up and turned into something new. But yeah, I think grooming to become Robin Hood is quite a different type of version to our classic Robin Hood tale, so I'm not against it in general. I think I prefer it to the actual story. The actual story doesn't make any sense as you look at it. You're just left going, how can I make this work? Yeah. And my first stab at making that work would be, well, you've got somebody making it work.
Bones, this theory is better than the lady's blessing. I don't know. The lady's blessing is
A lot of people want the lady's blessing to be the theory, though.
Yeah, it's question: is the ban on ranged weapons a direction from the lady or cultural trauma from the death of Shields? That's actually a super interesting question. So, according to the 6th edition book that goes really into the story of like the founding of Bretonia and the 12 great battles, it's originally not a directive of the lady. It's originally it's cultural trauma from the death of Gilles. That he's killed by a thrown weapon from an unknown hand.
And it becomes a core component of what it is to be a Bretonian noble. And the lady, happy with that shit. And that's why, for example, having an outcome where, say, for example, we go with the story where he's groomed, he goes around destabilizing Bretonia, thinking he's doing right. His wife sees him destabilize the empire and realizes that, in fact, he's doing wrong, even though he's doing right. He's saving people. No one's in the wrong here. Everyone's in the right, so to speak. But she sees a different wrong, which is the bigger picture wrong. The individual, every step is right, but the bigger picture is destabilizing Bretonia. And basically having the heart-to-heart with him, which is, hey, dude, we got to think better. We've got to be better, and ultimately sending him off on what becomes their Grail quest. And I would suggest that the entire core band become Grail Knights, all of them. Him with his bow, the lot. Okay, his wife, everyone. His wife who was a betrayer. You know, you want to have these difficult stories. The perfect group has to have someone betraying in there, or it doesn't make for a good novel, does it? So one of them sort of working against them. And they all, at the end of it, prove themselves worthy and show the nonsense that is Bretonian core, as you put it, was it cultural trauma? The core cultural trauma that they have at their heart is a nonsense and is not actually what the lady demands. It's what Bretonia demands, and he comes out the other side with a slightly different version. But that would be one way of doing it, because they are doing the good work and they prove themselves. And ultimately, that's all that you need to do to find the lady. That's what you need to do to find the lady, which means by the very nature of how the lady works, if they took that to its ultimate culmination point, they would almost certainly become Grail Knights, which would be a very interesting story. They wouldn't perceive themselves as knights. They wouldn't be wandering around in armor. They wouldn't be Grail Knights. They'd be more like seekers of the Grail who had succeeded. They would just be those who had supped from the lady's chalice and been blessed because they had done right by Bretonia. That'd be a different reading of it, though.
Yeah. All right. So, in the interest of time, because there's still a good number of super chats to get through, so I'm going to go ahead and put a quick little pause on that and get us through the roleplay stuff. Because there are a couple interesting developments here that I would not be surprised to see be used for when this story, I think, rather inevitably gets picked back up. So there were 2 books that came out for Bretonia that influenced a lot of. Bertrand himself does not make a reappearance until 4th edition, which is very, very recent. But in 2nd edition, Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, there were 2 books that kind of took the concept of Bertrand the Brigand and his the Bowman of Bergerac and ran with it, which was of course, the Knights of the Grail book, and then the big Master Career Compendium. Which is some really fun things, because the Career Compendium, if you've never picked that up, that is such a fun book. It is silly. Because it's just got so many fun little like adventure hooks and short stories and all sorts of other crazy shit in there. But basically what they did is that when they were developing the Knights of the Grail book, they decided that they were going to take the Merry Men and basically make them serious instead of just kind of like it's Robin Hood's Merry Men, and then move on. And so they introduced what's called the Haramalts. And the Haramalts are stated to literally be that in the Bretonian language, it translates to merry men, which is hilarious because that's not how French works. But basically what they are is they are outlaws that live outside of the law, that are mostly made up of peasants, but they do have some noble figures in there, which we'll get into a little bit. and they live by a very particular code, to the point that they basically have their own version of the vows, but for their purpose, which is that, so the code of the Heramalts is that you have the first code: do not harm the innocent. You cannot fight for justice by unjust means. Uphold justice where law has failed, which for them basically is that they're not allowed to kill innocent people, like no matter what. They have a very, very strict system within the way they try and handle affairs, where if it's like, oh, well, there'll be collateral. Collateral is not acceptable. If you're a member of the Heramalts and you have collateral damage trying to deal with someone, you will be usually killed. You'll be executed by hanging, or you'll at the very least be cast out, which is not ideal. The second code is take the excess from the wealthy to feed the starving. It is no harm to lose money that you do not need. Be true to your fellows. Betrayal is a foul deed worthy of greenskins and beastmen. So they're supposed to trust one another. They have a very strong trust code, and stealing money they don't consider a sin because they think if you don't need it, then you shouldn't have it. Third code: ask no questions of your fellow's past. Every Heramalt has his reasons for fighting and should be judged on his actions now. This one is actually fairly interesting when you delve into like the story hooks and stuff that they give you, because there's a whole bunch of stuff about how sometimes you'll have people that did some really nasty shit in their past lives, but are genuinely trying to redeem themselves and turn over a new leaf, and the Heramalts give them a chance to do that, and it is strictly forbidden among the Heramalts to ask about one another's past. Like, it is a punishable deed. Not with death, but you will be in trouble. And then the final one is, and this one's actually sensible, which is reject the ruinous powers and fight them even alongside tyrants. So the ruinous powers, they're like, yeah, like we hate like the big bad greedy knights, but the ruinous powers are kind of the super big awful stuff. From there, the Heramalts, they basically give them some structure to try and figure out how they would realistically work, because they take the idea of Bertrand like picking up an entire village, and like, where do they go? And basically it runs with, so the Heramalts live out in the wilds and the forests of Bretonnia, which are very dangerous. They rely on like a lot of various locations where they post up tents, but if they have larger colonies, they try and find caves. And they basically have these big, giant caves that are hidden away in certain parts of Bretonnia, where entire villages, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people are living, hiding out, hoping that they're not found. And they have like this really strict system for how people are initiated into becoming a Heramalt, where basically you have to wander out into the forest loudly shouting that you want to join them while just walking through the forest. And if you survive for long enough, because you're going to attract the attention of things like greenskins and beastmen and beasts and other horrors by shouting very loudly and the extremely fucking dangerous, go back and watch our tier list stream, Forest of Bretonnia. If you survive long enough, they are willing to come and chat with you. And then they put you through this program where you're basically put into various splinter cell groups, because they know that a lot of nobles and assassins are looking for them. So they run you through a bit of a program through splinter cell groups. So if you betray your fellows and you actually end up being an assassin, you only get a couple of people killed, or hopefully they find you out in time. Other than that, they take very, very heavily from the story of Bertrand le Brigand, except for it makes them more Robin Hood coded, funny enough, than Bertrand is. Bertrand, in his story, he fucking just murders people. Like, if there is an evil noble, he will kill you. The Heramalts and the Faceless, which their bosses are called the Faceless because they wear these big hoods so you can't see their face, and they're very mysterious and stuff, and allows them to travel incognito. They try really hard not to kill the tyrants and the bad nobles. They try and basically find to rob them and to find evidence of their misdoings and basically then like tie them up and leave them for the actually just people to find, to then take them to court through the systems that exist within the land itself, so that they don't bring the wrath of the nobility down on top of them. Whereas Bertrand doesn't give a fuck.
I think that there's various ways that we can look at this. The obvious one, and largely how it's pitched, is that we have another group that are working in Bretonnia, doing similar things to Bertrand the Brigand, and we're done. That's it. There's these Heremo, and they've got their faceless, and they're doing their attacks, and they're saving people, and they're living in various secret villages, and they're standing against the tyranny of Bretonnia. In many respects, they're upholding the ladies' virtues, but from a peasant perspective. And they might have some nobles mixed in, might have a few others mixed in along the way, but broadly speaking, they're their own group. Or alternatively, and as Sotek introduced, and I think is probably the more likely reading, should it be picked up, they're all going to get bundled together. And we have a progressing story here, which is we have Bertrand moving out, becoming the folk hero that he becomes, realizing that something has to change, something has to give. They have to approach this differently, particularly if they've had a couple of big mistakes. They've killed someone who perhaps didn't deserve to be killed. The classic story of, oh, we done fucked up, haven't we? As they kill a good noble or something. And they then start instigating changes in their own way of developing. And the new system is created that develops into the Heremo, everything that they become. And that seems to be the obvious next step. Effectively, they're a new Bretonnian force that you could probably feel as a minor army of peasants, mostly, with faceless as characters, with Bertrand le Brigand as a core character that's sitting at the back of it, and entire communities that are going with them. They are, however, let us be as blunt as we possibly can be here, out with the standard rule of Bretonnia. They are divisive, they are not accepted by the standard nobility, and they are, if you want to see them as a force for good that's dividing Bretonnia. And that's good. It's conflict at its heart, and it works quite nicely. But this is the one that looks like the fairy tale story of standing against oppression, but in fact is ultimately responsible for breaking apart one of the stronger weapons that the old world has against the incoming end times. So it tells a potentially double blade edge sword of a story. But I think the most likely retelling of this is that they're all conflated together. They are all part of the same greater whole, because as we know, Games Workshop doesn't like having too many threads to a story. They like pulling everything together to make everything simpler and cleaner to tell, particularly for battlefield stories, for their army lists and similar. So pulling them together as one group makes the most sense should they ever get around to doing that. Or if Total War decides to turn it into, for example, a Regiment of Renown or something similar, pulling them all together as one, again, makes more sense than separating them out and making it difficult to understand what the differences are between each faction.
Yeah, and there's a lot of little things that they leave to play around with as well. Like there's a concept of the faceless being these hooded individuals that try and remain anonymous, because not only that allows them to do their job well, but should one of them die, they could be replaced with no one being the wiser, and carry on a legend. But like some of them there's like one that's implied to be a spirit, the Hooded Blade. Which the Hooded Blade is this really spooky guy that wears all red. So he's got these crazy red robes, and he's like this tall, lean figure that approaches you on the road if you're a really bad guy. And out of nowhere, from within his robes, he pulls out this giant hand and a half, huge ass broadsword that should not fit in his robes. And from the way he acts and is talked about, he comes off like a spirit. Where he is a spirit,
which is appropriate for Bretonnia.
Yeah, and spooky as fuck. You have all sorts of like little things about the Heremonts and the Faceless interrupting tax systems, stealing things that they try and give back to the communities to help them, but they have to do it in really secret, clandestine ways. But you can play with that in fun ways, because interrupting supplies like that, interrupting taxes, interrupting food transportation, even though they might be doing the right thing for a local village, these are people that are not aware of like the larger crises going on in the kingdom. So they might be helping like their individual community, but they're actually causing significant supply chain crises towards the front against the Norskins or Greenskins or Beastmen. One of the things that when you're like reading the literature that they wrote for it, it's really easy to just be like, oh, God, these guys are just purely good guys. But you have to keep on when you're reading it that they have such a narrow little view of their local community, and they can so easily cause massive problems.
Yeah, agreed. They are an interesting part of the overall fabric of Bretonia because they are good guys. And the Bretonians themselves are, and I hate using such simple terms for Warhammer, but again, broadly speaking, good guys. And they are antithetical to each other in so many ways. And that creates some interesting conflict. And again, it's the sort of thing that we're going to need to have in place if we're going to destabilize Bretonia to the degree that is required for the end times to make any form of sense. So this is one of the primary arrows, the strings to our bows, if you will, that we've got to fire to help destabilize the nation. They think they're doing the right thing. I also think if you don't want to take that story route in particular, because a lot of people don't like taking the end time story route and they just want to create cool factions, this is a potential really strong alternate view for how lady worship can manifest within Bretonia. It doesn't need to be just the knights that are receiving the blessings. They have got themselves their own unique set of virtues and vows, largely in place already. And they have figures who have got what appear to be supernatural characteristics and capabilities. And they could be nothing more than different manifestations of the lady's blessing, because they are doing good ladies' work. They are doing the stuff that the lady agrees on. And that's quite important when we're pitching what they are inside the communities of Bretonia. And it would be almost heretical from the perspective of most nobles to consider that these people might actually, these rebels, these peasants who have gone way beyond their station, are somehow blessed by the lady. Nonsense. And that core conflict, I think, is a necessary component as well of potentially destabilizing what eventually we have at the end. To go back to, I think it's also worth reinforcing that I do think that King Luon would also be broadly supportive of much of what they stand for, which again creates divisions within Bretonia, because many of the nobles absolutely not only won't be, will despise them so much because of what they've done, either to their lands, to their people, or possibly their relatives who have died because, you know, they just happen to have a bad day and they get killed for it. You know what now? No, they were evil and wrong and they become bad uns. But people don't think about that about the people they know, because they only see the face that's offered to them, not the face that's offered to the peasants. And the face that's offered to them would be, you know, the nice guy at court who likes to wax into poetry sometimes. And then they're said, oh, now the peasants have killed him. What the fuck?
Play the God of War games if you want to see the newer ones. If you want to see a great example of, you can have a shitty person that's still deeply loved, despite the fact they're flawed as fuck.
Yeah, totally. And their relatives are being killed by these peasants. They are the fucking worst. So we can get ourselves some interesting religious schisms. We can get ourselves some interesting societal schisms. And all of them, everyone thinks that they're in the right. And that makes often for better, more complex stories. But it being Warhammer, we often want to turn it into, and it often does turn into, a black and white, and this is the bad guy who comes cackling out from behind the curtains. So that is often, if you're building a story out of this, worth considering. Where is our bad guy who's going to come cackling out from behind the curtains that we can then stab?
Fun little thing for y'all, and why you should go watch LAWhammer is one thing that I have learned from.
Sorry, Mr. I didn't bring up. Yeah. I should have known, Mr. Mike.
Yeah,
I'm surprised it wasn't Horus.
One of the lessons I've learned very, very well as like a GM, especially, and as a player, from watching LAWhammer and watching Andy's GMing style, that I deeply, deeply appreciate, and I think it's core to the Warhammer setting, that a lot of people don't necessarily realize, is Warhammer should have a very fundamental rule, which is that people that are a good man that has a strong set of morals, that is a flaw when you are going up against the horrors of the Warhammer world.
That's a harsh thing to say.
It's harsh, but it's true. Of that, if you are someone, and this is like what makes the Dark Elves such a critical component of what Warhammer is that if your character or the story that you're focusing, you're Bertrand the Brigand, Lewin Leyenker, if you people they are good men that have strong morals that they will not violate, if you have someone that says, I will not kill an innocent no matter what, there are forces in the Warhammer world that they're going to struggle against.
Yeah, you got to, one of the things that I have most problem with in general, with a lot of fiction, is bad guys who are idiots, who look at situations and can't see how easy it is to win. Bad guys who don't kill the good guy because he's the good guy, right? The writer writes themselves into a corner and they just have to have the bad guy do a not bad guy thing. And one of the core components of that is looking at good guys, which most books would say, what a great guy this guy is. Look how good he is. Look how noble he is. And the bad guy doesn't go, well, you're fucked then, because I can completely use that against you. Because there's lots of ways to use that against you, you idiot. And I'm now going to do it. Now you're screwed.
Yes.
Bullshit.
It's like the big thing about Llewyn Laneker and Bertrand both is that if you decide to run with the idea that they're good men, that is going to bite them in the ass. Because good men, they're still men, so they're going to make mistakes. Mm-hmm. And there are forces that will learn about those mistakes and wield it against them. With Llewyn, it being things like Malabad. With Bertrand being things that no matter how careful he may be or how good he thinks he is, innocent people are going to get hurt because of the shit that he's up to.
Yeah, I'm going to bring up this one because it's a good example of that. Ned Stark would die much faster in Warhammer. No, he'd die about the same speed. But he would die because that is the nature of how Warhammer typically works. Because there's something that Warhammer has that Game of Thrones doesn't have, objective evil. And by that, I mean there is forces looking to absolutely destroy the world and corrupt you. Absolutely. But it also is filled with all of the humans from Game of Thrones doing all of the human things, with all of their human failings and all of their human desperate struggles for power, which means that your poor Ned Starks, who are principled people, if they're in a good place where their principles work and they don't go and interact with people where their principles are a weakness, they're going to shine. I mean, being good isn't a bad character to trait have. It's a good one in general. But when you get yourself into positions where you're up against people who will use it against you, you will ultimately find yourself, if you're not willing to compromise or bend, on the receiving end of a knife. And Ned Stark is a good example of that. Ned could have got out of what he was doing multiple times, but because he was too honorable to just get the fuck out of Dodge and leave, because he'd made a promise, he was doomed. I'm going to bring up this one as well. Ned's failing was being stupid, not too good. No, he wasn't stupid. He was too honorable and refused to back down.
You could argue that being too honorable and refusing back down.
Stupid. Yes, I agree. Ultimately, that's the core of what this particular thesis is, which is to be clever, you have to break your own morals. If you're viewing that as what being clever is. It's
like dwarfs. Dwarfs would do much better for themselves if they were not so goddamn honorable and focused on grudges and taking their culture so seriously. If they would just be, from a dwarf perspective, morally bankrupt, they would be far more successful.
Forgive the elves and work with them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, we gotta get caught up on things here. Singemeister, what cultural penetration? I don't know what cultural penetration even means.
With Bretonnia, Stallion, the Empire. So I'm not quite sure what you're meaning. Do you mean what's the penetration of other places into Bretonnia, as in how much does Estalia influence the south? How much does the Empire influence the north? If that's what you mean, as in how much their cultures penetrate, then significantly, actually. The nature of Paravon is much, much closer to some of the Imperial standards than, crossover, etc. Yeah, that's what I figured. If you go down to, say, Carcassonne in the south, they have strong Myrmidian leanings in almost everything that they do, and their general ethos is tied very closely to Myrmidian teaching, which has come from both Estalia and Tilia. Slightly different lessons from both sides because Estalia and Tilia, but nevertheless, the core lesson still stands as Myrmidian teachings. And the same is the case as we move around the coast. There's a strong, burgeoning middle class that is making its way. What was that?
I'm saying, let's hurry up. We got a lot to get through.
Are we almost running out of time? So I'll be very quick. A strong burgeoning middle class that is spreading all along the coast, which are being influenced strongly by Marienburg. So the answer is quite a lot.
Yeah, Charles Decay, what if Bertrand was a secret beastman?
Fuck
One which
me.
looked human enough, leading to the whole tactical thing. Could be chaos, but more fun as a good guy one. Hey, if you want to have the idea that he he uses the tactics and he's such a good archer, he has all of these skills that seemingly came out of nowhere because he actually is a mutant or a beastman or something. Yeah, you can run with that. That'd be wild.
Yep. Agreed.
Skylar Martin, Bernie, ha ha ha, Zinch Wizard, sup, dude, you're doing great work. Our master loves you. What you're doing, Bernie? What?
Yeah. See, the characters like Bertrand and Brigand are perfect Zinch champions without ever being one.
Yep.
And they have literally no attachment to Zinch at all, but Zinch will help them. Bertrand's the sort of character that Zinch would have cultists infiltrate, not to corrupt, but to support.
Yeah. Oh man, there is no pawn more prized by Zinch than a good man.
Yeah, absolutely.
Eli the Grey. I've always thought it was a wasted opportunity not to make Bretonnia being French revolutionaries versus Arthurian knights, with chaos trying to worm its way into both factions.
Eli the Grey, I think there is something to that, and I think that in some respects, it's what Bertrand the Brigand kind of represents as a potential story.
Yeah, and there might be something that shows up. If Astalia ever gets fully developed, the border between Astalia and Bretonnia could still have that kind of like people with guns in a different form of social standing and honor and everything goes dealing with Arthurian knights and yada, yada, yada. It could still exist, but it might exist in a different fashion.
Yeah.
Brock 6000, how about a more comedic Bertrand? And he's just an ineffectual robber. He keeps failing upwards and people misinterpret his actions as epic or evil.
Anyone from the UK who is of my generation will be aware of Maid Marian and Her Merry Men, which was a TV show from the marvelous mind of, oh God, his name suddenly escaped me, from Blackadder. Somebody write his name in the comments because his name just suddenly escaped me. I can see him literally in my mind's eye. He did Time Team as well. Regardless. And Maid Marian was the brains behind it all, and their Robin Hood figure was nothing more than an idiot, an actor effectively, who'd been pulled in because no one would believe that a woman could lead all of these things and do all of this stuff. So Maid Marian and Her Men, not Rowan Atkinson, the other one. Tony Robinson, thank you very much. God, my brain's dying today. And that was the story that was being told there. I strongly recommend it. Every year on Pancake Day, I post their Pancake Day song, which goes, unsurprisingly, it's Pancake Day, it's Pancake Day, it's Pancake Day, because they have a whole bit about the peasants making pancakes out of mud because they can't afford flour. Man,
UK just loves their little songs.
Pancake Day is the best day. Don't even.
On the 701, are there true levier types? I assume is what that's.
There is not true leveler types. Bertrand is currently where we have it.
Cool. Hey, Sotek. Inui.
Oh, Brock, you're a dick.
Inui and Ennui. Yes. The three holy phrases. Yes. Has Bretonnia ever had a crusade in Ethelloren? No, but they should have.
Yeah, they really should have. And this is something that I feel is a gap in their lore. And I think the answer is probably yes. At some point, someone will go, why haven't we done that? Let's do it.
Yeah, there should have been a king that got so fucking furious at like a wild hunt that he declares an errantry crusade against the Fae.
100%. Yeah, I agree so hard that I'm a little surprised that nobody's bothered to do it yet.
Yeah, that actually just shocked me because I just had the same brain thought of like, oh, yeah, that really should be there, and it's not. Hieronymus, what if Bertrand's ancestor was one of the followers of Gilles? He was good with a bow, but took the vow like all the others when Gilles fell in love with Apparash, like you suggested. He killed Gilles. That's why the bow is significant. So one thing I'll say, one thing I've always loved about the death of Gilles is the part of this I'm going to kind of essentially focus on, is that it's always stated that he was killed by an unknown hand. Nobody saw who threw whatever it was that hit him and killed him, which if you go with the end times route, that's how Ladriel kills Ariel. She does the exact same thing, is that she throws something at her and kills her in the middle of a battle. But it could also be that, like, if you have someone that turned against you, the story doesn't say it, but I've always kind of vaguely interpreted it as it was a betrayal. That's
I'm going to bluntly say it. It so screams Ladriel. It so screams the lady did it to create the martyr, to create what she needed for the kingdom, that it's almost not even worth considering. It's almost a non-story. It's so It's so very obvious that if you tell the story, it is clearly meant to be that.
So, Mike, there are two times Jill gets hit with a ranged weapon. The first time he gets hit by a thrown weapon from a orc, big bad orc, or no, it's a goblin bolt thrower. So a goblin bolt thrower shoots him once, and he almost dies, but miraculously he heals and then goes back out and kicks the shit out of the orcs. But then there's the time he actually dies.
Yeah.
Where it's not known who hits him.
And it's 100% clearly Ladriel's intention.
Yeah,
I mean, it does everything that Ladriel needs.
It's $1 billion the lady that like killed him.
I mean, if whoever ends up writing this at a later point, say 20 years down the line, and they pick up this story again, start retelling it another way, and if they make it something other than Ladriel, the Lady of the Lake, it's a massive missed opportunity because it shows the nature of her character.
Yeah, and if you run with, I think, the genius idea that he was in love with Abarash and the lady was not going to allow this to go any further because this was leading down the road she had not designed, so she takes him out and martyrs him and then turns him into the Green Knight, kind of against his will. Oh, it's a spicy story. Bloomble. Cheer, funny thought. The ranged weapon come after Gilles' death, so technically one of the Gilles companion Grail Knights could have been an archer? Question mark? Maybe the one who, after Gilles' death, was the first to cast aside his bow, who for the Forgotten Grail Chapel with the bow, artifact heresy, that could be done. So you could absolutely, if you wanted to, you could absolutely run with that. Some of the companions use ranged weapons, which would have been logical. And then after that thing happens with Gilles, they're like, never again. That's cowardice. We won't do that. Because it is odd, isn't it? It is odd.
I mean, yeah, I'm totally cool with that.
Yeah.
Good idea.
Gary Garanazin, what Sotek said about the morals guys struggling is the basis of the so-called grimdark fantasy, Joe Abercrombie, Mark Lawrence, Glenn Cook, the Game of Thrones.
Yeah, it's almost true. The grimdark nature of your own virtues getting in the way and becoming vices.
Can't believe bros are trying to add spice to my Warhammer. I like it only with salt. How dare you?
No pepper, thanks.
Yeah. But yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And it's a core thing for Bretonnia, especially. Like, because everything that talks about
it's just a fairy tale.
Yeah. And it's like if you're gonna have Warhammer work, there's gotta be sinister linings. Cole Patterson, the way you describe how Bretonnia needs an awful feudal system to defeat chaos sounds to me like the 40k argument that the Imperium needs an awful fascist system to fight chaos. What's the difference?
A god is doing it here, and it's not the right outcome. It's not correct. It's not the only thing that can be done. It's what the god has decided to do to create a weapon. And that god is being utterly, you could argue, selfish, certainly utterly inhuman in how it's approaching the situation, which is they are just tools to be used. It's horrific. What's the difference? You've got someone to blame, and you can see them right there, and they are arguably very much in the wrong, while simultaneously are doing something that could make a difference. But as we know, it doesn't. Ultimately, even if you don't like the story of Bretonnia from the end times, the actual core of what it represents, I think, leads into this perfectly, which is, it's wrong. The whole setup broke. It didn't work. So what's the big difference? And much like 40k, it's fucking wrong. And that's good, I think.
Yeah, I would say the big difference is that, in my opinion, is that in fantasy, it's very evident and very easy to see from the reader, from any reader's perspective, that the answer Bretonnia has come to is wrong. Whereas in 40k, they have a bad habit.
They justify it as right.
They justify it and are like, oh no, this is the right answer. When
fascism is needed. Yeah, totally. And I would also argue that Ladriel here does not take that argument either. She's not saying that this is the only way to do it. And indeed, if we run with the story that we've been suggesting through this particular stream, Cole, the answer that humanity has come up with from the virtues is one of their own creation in many respects. The whole vow that they take and the things that they do is as shaped by their own experience as it is by Ladriel's needs and demands of them. It's not entirely coming from the outside, and Bertrand potentially shows another route towards Grail virtue that the knights would absolutely turn their back on and say is dishonorable and wrong. It's culturally wrong. Yet Bertrand the Brigand shows another potential route through to it, showing that Ladriel even is not even that figure with this absolutism that's sitting on top of it. That absolutism is entirely a human-born desire for control, for understanding, for shaping the world, whatever it might be, and ultimately is to the detriment of their society when it comes to the end times, because it all goes fucking wrong.
Yeah, an important thing about the Bretonnians as well is that the culture they adapted of like there is the peasant caste and the noble caste, and that the peasants, or well, it was a warrior caste originally, and the peasants were like, oh, we'll do all the labor and and then we'll give you all the food so you can be as strong as possible and you protect us. They established that way before they met the lady, way before. It was when they like moved into the lands that we know as Bretonnia, but they didn't end up meeting the lady for like hundreds of more years after that.
Yeah. What about a comment here from Mike? Didn't you say that they were the good guys? I did put quotations around that, and I said I didn't like using the term. But by that, I mean that they are objectively bound by virtues that mean they do good, as we understand the core concept of moral good and moral wrong. And they are good guys fighting what is virtuous and right. So, yeah, sure. They are. I don't have a particular problem with saying that. The models that they use around that doesn't necessarily mean that they are being good, though. It's complicated, much like all of life. That's why I sort of air quoted the whole thing. They're good guys. They're virtuous, right? Yes, but what about the social fabric and the models you've built around that to allow you to do your good work? We don't worry about that, because that just is. We worry about doing good shit. Life is difficult, man.
Mm-hmm. And with that, I'll continue picking out comments and stuff, but I think we can go ahead and get ready to launch into our outro.
Holy shit, already. Fuck me. It feels like we've barely started on this one. Right, so I've got a couple of things just to say before we go. First, his rules in Warhammer are super simple. He basically has a little bit more ballistic skill. Anyone that's in his unit gets an extra ballistic skill.
His rules.
We didn't cover that, so we're just covering it super, super quickly. And again, this is from memory because I played him a lot. So I might have it wrong. Okay, so if I got any... All right, you just read that quickly. So okay, let's see how good my memory is.
The Bowman of Bergerac, you would upgrade your regular peasant archers to be these guys.
1 point each?
Yes, 1 point a model. And it was 83 points for the trio. So you got Bertrand, Hugo Le Petit, and
for only 83 points. That's awesome.
Only 83 points, and then 1 point extra per model. So the Bowman of Bergerac had better ballistic skill. I believe they also had better leadership than peasants.
What's his leadership?
7.
No, the Bowman. No, that's just standard.
Okay, because Bertrand's 8, but
8. So that's leadership 1.
Yeah, and 1. So Bertrand's big thing is that every turn he can reroll to hit with his longbow. Very nice.
He's got ballistic skill 5. That means he hits on a 2+ on a D6 roll with modifiers.
Yes. He also has a unique magic item, which is the Black Arrow.
The Black Arrow
has that dragon's tooth. Where the fuck did he get a dragon's tooth? You don't just find those. And when he fires it, basically, as long as he hits with it, it auto wounds and ignores all non-magical armor.
Brilliant for taking down knights, by the way. Just saying.
Yeah, it's literally a knight killer.
Amazing at it.
Like he is a knight sniper. You have Hugo Le Petit, who is actually surprisingly spooky because he's ballistic skill 4, strength 5, toughness 4. But his bow is so big because he's such a big man. He fires strength 5.
Yes, it's like, as I recall, they describe it like firing javelins. Because his arrows are so big. I always liked him. Strength 5. That's 2+ to wound your average trooper. Always good.
Yep. Then you have Gilles Legros, who is the fat monk that's running around with this big old
with
barrel.
A stupid rule, as I recall.
Yeah, it's useless.
It's actually useless. An absolutely pathetic rule. Hey, here, have some drink. That'll help, won't it? No.
So Gilles Legros makes your unit wasted, which gives them immune to panic, whoop-de-doo, and -1 to hit for the rest of the game.
So if you're playing a Bretonnian army, typically you during this rule set, you only did panic tests when someone broke beside you. But your unit was in a wedge, an arrow shape, with often Bertrand le Brigand at the front, Hugo Batille and Guy le Gros sitting to either side, and they sat at the back just firing shots, meaning there was hardly ever anyone near them, ever. Meaning they never took panic tests anyway. And the loss that you took for drinking that, which is, if I recall correctly, you lose your extra +1 ballistic skill, i.e. you get an extra -1 to hit. For the rest of the battle. And it's also got a really weird description where it says, oh, they're only allowed to take 1 drink of it, but that's okay because it lasts for the whole battle. Why even write it then? What the fuck? You could just say, here's your special rule that you can use once per battle, but it's got a whole bit about, oh, there's only enough for 1 drink each. Oh, what does that mean? You can only take 1 drink, but it lasts for the entire battle. Bullshit.
So, but from what that lets us know that whatever Gilles Gross is carrying around is some serious shit. You take
totally
1 drink, you're blasted for the rest of the battle.
And remember that Warhammer is a game of scale. You always start approximately 24 inches from each other, but that's meant to represent a really big distance. Each single character that you've got, well, each one of the various models you've got is meant to represent like 10, 15, 20 guys or whatever. So a unit of 15 is actually meant to represent like a unit of 200 or whatever, moving around. So scale-wise, a battle lasts for a good day or so. So that basically does you for the day. You're screwed, which amuses me.
The good old Asterix magic potion, but without any of the positive effects.
Without any of the positives. It's genuinely rubbish. And it was a rule that I think I have never used in battle once.
It's terrible.
Because it's a terrible special rule.
Terrible.
Now, admittedly, they're only like 83 points, so you literally didn't care. Because their cost so little. They were, as characters, super, super cheap, but which meant the shop sold fucking tons of them because everyone who played Bretonnians used them, and anyone who allied with Bretonnians went, well, they're cheap, I'll use them as well.
Bertrand, awesome. Hugo Le Petit, awesome. Get that guy out of here. Get that guy out of here.
So now we've covered loosely what they could do, which is, in the greater scheme of things, not that much. You'd expect to have special guerrilla rules or infiltration rules where they could stealth in and come out of a forest. Nope, they didn't do that. And I think that would be the case if we were getting them as a special character in a newer, upgraded edition. You would probably have them coming out of a forest from somewhere, doing a guerrilla attack, and then possibly if you end your movement 2 inches within a forest, you can then teleport to another forest for your move next round. Okay, so basically you're doing guerrilla attacks around the battlefield. That's fucking cool. But do they do that? They do not. And why is that? Because as we opened right at the very beginning, Bertrand le Brigand is an old character from an old edition of Warhammer, 5th edition. And whilst he wasn't ported into 6th, his influence has been marked all the way through into the current modern roleplay game. He's a character that still is out there doing his thing, but not really hitting any of the games currently, and is generally heard as a whisper on the edge. He is, as we said right at the very beginning, Warhammer's Robin Hood type figure. But through the course of this stream, we have highlighted that the story that he has currently, because it's a 5th edition story, where often they played fast and loose with things that nowadays you have to question and go, well, how did they get that with things like dragon's teeth? They're not just lying around nowadays. The older Hero Hammer version of Warhammer, you tended to find that magic items just flew around all over the place. But back in our more modern version of Warhammer, you're left going, well, how did he get this? Through the course of this stream, we've shown that not only does Bertrand le Brigand represent something in Bretonnia that is very rarely examined, which is peasants and their potential uprisings and their mistreatment, because many peasants are mistreated in Bretonnia. They are basically serfs. In many parts of Bretonnia, they are effectively slaves. They are there to do one thing only, which is whatever they're told to do to best support their local nobles, so the local nobles can then protect them and Bretonnia as a whole. So we've got ourselves a different angle with this character. We're discussing peasants and peasant uprisings, which is something that I think does speak to a different type of Bretonnia than we generally get from most of the books that we have on offer. And I think makes this character uniquely interesting for potentially taking further. When we get a revision of this character at a later date, what do we do with Fantasy Robin Hood and the guerrilla tactics that they have for effectively persecuting those who persecute the peasants So basically, a character who attacks Bretonnians. What do we do with this? Now, we've already pitched a couple of ideas through the course of this stream. We could, for example, say that this is a character who's being supported by Chaos without being a Chaos character, because he represents a destabilization of Bretonnian society, something that Chaos very much wishes to occur so that they can best take it down at a later date. So it could be that. Alternatively, you could take a route where it's nothing to do with Chaos, and in fact, it's the royal line of Mousillon, the Duke or one of the other important nobles, their ancestors are influencing Bertrand, Le Brigand, and his band to effectively take revenge upon Bretonnia. And we pitched a story where the unnamed maid Marion alike could potentially be the one that's responsible for that. And the entire thing is basically grooming Bertrand and his band to help destabilize Bretonnia, and then possibly even with her story, her realizing that she is arguably in the wrong. And that is also potentially interesting. Another route would be Bertrand is in fact going to ultimately fall to Chaos. That would be a story I personally wouldn't like. Not just because that's the story they always freaking go with, but because it would be another example of our rebels actually just being Chaos guys. I'd prefer not to do that. But what I would prefer to do is use Bertrand the Brigand in a new and interesting way. To do something with him. To not simply have Robin Hood in the Wastelands. Now, they've already taken that story on to a degree with some of the roleplay books, with the Hermalt, and exactly what they're doing with their faceless, shadowy figures. And there's also that potential interpretation that they're all part of the same network with Bertrand, and they are all part of potentially a lady-facing group as well, who are not heretics against the lady, no matter how much they may have sacked one of the Grail chapels. There's a whole story there that's not told. They could have had reasons. And if that's the case, then possibly we're heading towards a new manifestation of how lady worship could be understood in Bretonnia. And I think that's a good thing, because as it currently stands, it is largely in the province of nobles to gain all the core benefits. And this would be a route through for the peasantry to also gain what effectively would be, at the end of it, Grail received true benefits. They wouldn't be Grail Knights, because Grail Knights are Grail Knights. But they would be those who had managed to, through their good deeds, heavy quotation marks, yet again for the word good, through their good deeds, to be of note to the lady, and for the lady to appear to them and say, you are what makes Bretonnia strong. Well done. Good job. You have found me. And through finding me, here is what you get. And it would also answer to some of the weird faceless one abilities and their characters and what they can do. Perhaps that process has already begun. The whole cult of the Lady of the Lake is potentially much more complicated than just simply shining knights doing shiny knighty virtue things. There might be much more going on in Bretonnia than we first perceive. And the story that we have from Bertrand the Brigand kind of nails that into place. It gives us another story. All of the building blocks are there. If you like your Lego, you've already given the full set and the instructions. You just have to build it. And at the moment, nobody has built it. What they have is a Lego set and instructions that clearly make for an interesting, complicated, and potentially divisive Bretonnia. One that isn't just simply fairy tale castles, shining knights, slaying dragons. It's one which has a complicated relationship with its peasantry, and peasantry that are rising up in a variety of different ways, sometimes as virtuously and as righteously as the knights that they stand against. And that makes for some interesting conflict. And ultimately, if we are attempting to stick with Games Workshop's story, which is one of the things we sort of try to do at Lorebeards. We try to make all versions of the lore make sense. Which means if we are going to stick with the end times, we've got to show how Bretonnia, which is, let's be blunt, fucking rock hard, with its various Grail Knights, when they are all summoned and they go to war in the end times, why do they lose so badly? Why does the Empire, which is a fucking mess by comparison, and I do mean a mess, Why does it land so hard by comparison? It also gets fucked, but in a much slower way. But why is Britonia so badly broken? And one of the jobs that we would have to do if we were making it all make sense would be incumbent upon us to look at it and say, let's build good, strong stories for why Britonia broke early. And the obvious answer is because it's attacked. And how does that attack manifest? And one of the obvious ways to do that is it attacks itself. The very virtues that they stand for are the weakness that stands before them because they refuse to back down from what they believe is right. And when on one side, the merry men, the Herimo, the faceless ones, whatever, are virtuously claiming that they're in the right, and when the knights and the nobles on the other side are virtuously claiming they're in the right, and they're attacking each other all over the place. When that's happening, it's a lot easier for Mousillon to turn bad fast. It's a lot easier for chaos to slip in. It's a lot easier for the end times to look like a realistic outcome for what Britonia could be. So my conclusion for this one is Bertrand the Brigand breaks Britonia because I want to alliterate, because he's of the Bowmen of Bergerac. Bertrand the Brigand and the Bowmen of Bergerac break Britonia. They are, by being perfect Robin Hood-like figures, ultimately responsible for shattering the fabric of Britonia in one way or another. And I think we have a beautiful character for doing it. And you might say, well, that sucks. Yeah, well, that's what they get for ditching the character, isn't it? We get to do whatever we want with it. There we go. What do you think of that one, eh?
I think there's a lot of things you could work with there, and hopefully this gives y'all the ammo to imagine what you want Bertrand to be, because he's pretty open. It's an open concept.
My only request when you're doing this is make sure that it involves the letter B. It's like Sesame Street.
Try to
today's letter is the letter B. And the number 3, because apparently there's only 3 merry men named.
Badly, so you're getting the idea.
See, you get the idea, Singemeister.
Bloomble, no, you don't. I don't know whether that's a reference.
I don't know what we were discussing at that point. Sorry, Bloomble.
The beast is a dragon ghoul, in my opinion. Headcanon. A dragon has been killed by a Grail Knight on this place. The castle built on its corpse. The mother and daughter try to make it undead. Also explains the dragon tooth for the arrow for the Bertrand, but maybe given by the princess in Andy's story.
Yeah, that could work quite well, although there's a big hole in that. Why the fuck is it a Cyclops?
Yeah. It could be a
big hole there. I mean, in my head, it was always a Jabberwock. But again, they've got 2 eyes, not 1, so it's not.
Yeah, and
I actually thought it was a Jabberwock. I think you're thinking of the
big flappy monster sounds so Jabberwock. It's stupid. I always think the Jabberslith or Jabberwock, Jabberslith, whatever, is the creature.
2 different creatures. Jabberslith and the Jabberwock are 2 very different things.
Yeah, that's funny.
The Jabberslith is using the Jabberwock as a starting point, making something new. But the old Jabberwock popped up all over the place, and it's still in a couple of the old army lists as well. And mentioned in Britonia right in one of its earlier stories too.
Yes, it is. Because it's talked about like eerily. It's like, the Jabberwock did it. But I always held on to the idea that the Jabberwock was the creature that Gaston killed on the bridge to get to the Fey Enchantress, the like horrible beastie. But anyway, Bluebell, I'll keep sending cheer with headcanon until the end of time, so that we never end Britonia week. I'm so sorry, Bluebell. It is coming.
Britonia week has pretty much come to an end. But it's been good though.
Yeah, it was. I think we got to hit a lot. Like the only thing, funny enough, the only thing we haven't really tackled is like knights. It's like
true fact. What are the virtues? How do knights work? How do you move from a questing knight to being a full knight of the realm?
What's Rowan's deal? What's Malabod's deal? Yeah, there's a lot of things still left to talk about, but at a later date. Mike, I tried, but they're ignoring my cheer, so I won't be able to stop the end of Britonia week. I failed you all. Source lost in Britonia.
As it turns out, you were wrong, Bloomble. We absolutely did not ignore your cheer. We just hadn't got to it yet because we were busy working through our. And you've now Is that the last one? Because if that was the last one, that would be actually hilarious. It's not the last one, though.
Sadly, Biofoot came in with this. So Andy has taught us vampires equal cake and Bretonia equals Legos.
No, because I come from the UK. We do not say Legos because they're not Legos. Lego's the name of the company. They're Lego bricks. We do not pluralize Lego. We pluralize whatever it is that they are. That would be like saying Games Workshops. I'm playing with my Games Workshops now. No, they're Games Workshop miniatures. Get out of it.
Really? So I can keep it? I mean, depending on how fast, but be responsible with your money. That's
quick. Click end stream. Quick.
Yeah. So thank you all so much for joining us. Saurus or Bloomble here. Saurus Lost in Bretonia really did do a lot of the heavy. He
did, and thanks very much for bringing us over here because we wouldn't have if you hadn't thrown that ridiculous amount of super chat in our direction.
Yeah, so we hope everyone had fun with Bretonia Week because we will not be coming back to Bretonia for a little bit. You know, it won't be forever.
A lot of other factions.
But God, you're making me click on so many fucking things. Stop it. Chris, no questions, just supporting my favorite Warhammer Fantasy podcast. Looking forward to 40K stuff since I know nothing about it. We hope you'll like it. We really, really hope you'll like it. It'll be different. It'll be quite different.
Of course it'll be different.
That's good. That's good.
And hey, you know what? It's okay to not like it. That's fine because we're still going to be here rabbiting on like idiots about Warhammer 2. So it's fine. It's just going to be a different avenue for those who want to follow it.
Yeah, and it'll also open up the future opportunities for more crossover stuff.
Yeah, it will.
Head cannon, everyone, quick! Well, now we have to coin playing with our GWs or Citadels. What?
Yeah, exactly. I refuse to do that, Survivor. I refuse. It's not Legos. It's Lego bricks.
It's Americans do have a funny. That is a very funny thing over here. It's like, I want a Coke, and it's like, well, do you mean like a Coke, or do you just mean like a soda? And it's like, well, I mean, they're all the same thing. It's like, no, no, they're not.
Pepsi on this side.
Pepsi. The most famous phrase you will always hear in every diner in America. Do you guys have Coke? No, we have Pepsi. Is that all right? You have Dr. Pepper? Yeah, I'll take the Dr. Pepper. Fucking Pepsi. Ugh. Mechanical Beast, I just got my DNA test and I'm 17% Scottish. Rate my headcanon. I am now Andy's distant cousin.
Yeah, it's almost certainly likely. When Lindsay did my, just as a small aside, family tree, and we found out that I was related to pretty much every royal line in Europe, it was genuinely hilarious. I am a mixture of Scottish, English, Scandinavian, French, Constantinopolian. That's not how you say it. Polish. What else did we have? Transylvanian, that popped up. There's just all manner of bullshit in my bloodline. And yeah, that means I've got ancestors that go all over the place. So I'm probably related to half of you out there somehow.
I mean, I feel like if you don't have, I mean, most of humanity probably has a common ancestor. So, you know, if you go back far enough, everybody's related somehow.
Thanks, mitochondrial Eve.
Miracle twist here. Thank you. All right, my dudes, we're gonna get out of here for y'all.
Thanks, everyone. That has been a really fun one. We weren't sure exactly how that one was going to land, but as it turns out, as is always the case in Lorebeards, once we get going, there is so much to say.
So we will see y'all this Wednesday, where I kind of think I wanted. Oh fuck, what was it? I didn't write it down.
We'll decide after, just to double check. So we will pop up an advert very soon.
Yes, there was a really good idea, and now I'm struggling to remember what it was. And I wanted to do it this Wednesday.
Don't worry about it. They'll put another freaking super chat in. Stop thinking. Get to an end, Sotek. Holy shit.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Shep. Okay, we're out here. Bye-bye.
See you later. Bye.